My file changed the inheritance because my son has autism, despite my grandfather-in-law's dying wish to provide for him. Before we get into this story, you should know, my son is 5 years old and is nonverbal autistic. When I was pregnant, my grandfather-in-law Robert Sr. told me that if I had a son and named him Robert IV, he would inherit the family fortune of several $1 million worth of real estate and investments. This was his dying wish that his name lived on. I of course didn't know that my son would be nonverbal autistic, but I agreed to it because I wanted to do what's best for the family. My grandfather-in-law told me that his will was that the property be passed to his son Robert Jr., my FIL, and then to his son and my husband, Robert III, and then left to our son Robert IV, who would most likely pass it on to his son one day. Well, he passed shortly after and left everything to his son with future intentions known and agreed upon. I had my son Robert IV and I thought that would be the end of it. Until a week ago. My FIL has 2 sons. Robert, my husband, the oldest, and Richard, who is the middle child. Robert, my husband, is hardworking, good with money and reliable. My Bill, on the other hand, is not. He can't hold a job. He has multiple kids from different moms that he barely sees, let alone takes care of. He's also been in and out of rehab or jail, petty theft or drug use, etc., nothing major, the last decade. He's been given every opportunity to turn his life around and refuses each time. He's been given cars, job opportunities, places to live that other people who don't have wealthy parents to fall back on would kill for. He never takes it seriously and always takes it for granted. The only reason he is alive right now is being constantly bailed out or enabled by my MIL. Most recently, we've given him our house, at my MIL's suggestion, so he could have a place to stay after he got out of rehab and to give him a safe place for his kids to visit so he could try to build a relationship with them. My husband and I needed a bigger place for our growing family anyway, so we agreed to it and bought a second home, and Richard moved into the first. He now pays the mortgage and whatever is needed to maintain the property. It's been a few months and surprisingly he's been making the payments on time despite not having a job. I suspect Miel has been giving him the money. I thought everything was fine until last Sunday when we got together for dinner. My Bill mentioned how he couldn't wait to move to his new place. I asked what he was talking about and he said he was moving into my grandfather-in-law's house. Excuse me. I pulled my husband and Phil into the other room and asked what was going on. My husband had no idea, but my son told me that he was changing the will to leave the property and investments/money my grandfather left behind for our son to Richard. My husband's son would be getting my Phil property and smaller portfolio. Normally I wouldn't care, but this property was promised to my son. My son is nonverbal autistic, which we didn't know about when grandfather-in-law passed away. I'm not sure if he'll ever be able to live on his own or take care of himself after we're gone. My husband and I always planned that if that were the case, our son could move into the property guest house and rent out the main home, which is currently being used as a family beach house for weddings or events or reunions, etc. He could survive off that and the money from the portfolio to pay for a caretaker. This would give him a chance to live independently, and if he turned out to not need additional support in the future, then it was his to pass on or live in or whatever. Before anyone asks, we did not forget about our other 2 children. Our daughter will inherit the house Uncle currently lives in. Our second son will inherit our current home. Yes, their inheritance will be significantly less than their older brother, but it was never our money to give away. Grandfather-in-law, who was the original owner of the property, made it very clear that he was leaving this for my oldest son and him alone. We want to stand by his wishes. My MIL and BL both knew of this plan. They told me they were supportive of my efforts to provide for our son's future and that I was a good mother for thinking so far ahead. I was deeply upset by this news and asked why he was changing his mind after promising to his father and to my husband that he would pass this on to his grandson and great-grandson. He said that he always intended to respect his father's wishes, but that our son Robert IV didn't live up to the namesake expectations that he's sure grandfather had for an heir. Yep. My son wasn't worthy because he was autistic. Since he knew that my husband would honor his word and leave it to our son, he thought it would be best if he cut my husband out altogether and leave it to his other son Richard. I asked him why he would leave it to someone as reckless as Richard when his youngest Rachel was more financially responsible. He said it was because only a son could be an heir. Apparently my MIL has also been pressing for months to give Richard the home, and that Richard told him that he deserved better than our charity. That since we had 2 homes, that we saved and paid for on our own, that it was only fair if he was given grandfather's property and money. I immediately excused myself, grabbed my kids and left the house. My husband and I talked, and while he's upset about what happened legally, Grandpa left the home to his dad and he isn't obligated to leave it to him in spite of his promise. He says that he's sure we'd find another way to provide for our son if he needs it. That, however, isn't good enough for me. We busted our butts and sacrificed so that we could give all of our children a home to live in someday. Now we're being put into a position where we have to choose which of our children get a home. Not to mention if our son does need additional support and income, he's going to have to live with us and off of our income and will not have the chance to be independent. This is when I thought about the dirty little secret buried in the family skeleton closet. 2 years ago, my husband and his 2 siblings were given those DNA tests for Christmas and found out that Richard was only their one-half brother. They confronted Mil, who admitted to having an affair, but she didn't know if Richard was Fil or her lover's child. When she got pregnant, she apparently ended the affair for good and hasn't strayed since. She begged her kids to not tell Fil because Richard needed his support. She said he would disown him and divorce her if he ever knew the truth. For the sake of keeping the peace, and since this wasn't my side of the family drama, I agreed to never speak about it again. But since we're breaking promises and going behind each other's backs, I just might print out his one-half brother status and mail it anonymously to Phil. This of course will implode the family while I happily watch from the sidelines, as well as securing my son's place as the inheritor of the family fortune. After all, only a son can be an heir, and Richard is not his son. A few days later, added to the post in response to people commenting on the post and readability. Edit: I'd like to give some more context to those in the comments. I am not rich by any means at all. My parents grew up in poverty and worked their way up to lower middle class. I'm not educated beyond high school, and even then I was average at best. I'm neurodivergent like my son, but at a higher function level, and did not do well in subjects that did not interest me. My husband and I met on a high school track field, and it was love at first sight. His parents did not want us to be together. I was not the girl they picked out for him, and I didn't come from the right kind of family or come from the same religious background. My husband knew choosing me was going to make his life harder and he'd have less support, and he did it anyway. He lost his college fund, so he joined the military. I worked in a pizza shop while he was in training, and we got married right after, and I moved into his 2-bedroom apartment he shared with a guy from his work. I worked at a Waffle House around the corner while he took college classes online. We worked hard to get where we are now. He got out after finishing college, and we moved back home and bought our first house, a small 3-bed 2-bath. I want to point out that in the first 5 years of our marriage, while they didn't accept me, they were never mean or rude to me. They called their son regularly. They were always cordial about me and asked how I was, and always sent gifts on Christmas and our birthdays. After we moved back and they actually got to know me, we became a lot closer. I also converted to their religion, and I felt like they were starting to accept me, and when I got pregnant with our son, I was officially a part of the family. I did not see any reason to not trust them or believe them when my grandfather-in-law asked me to name my son after him. My husband is a very sincere and honest person, so when he told me they were serious, that's all I needed to hear, and I agreed to it for the sole purpose of securing a better future for my son. I wanted to name my son after my own father and grandfather, and they knew that, and it was incredibly difficult to go to my dad and tell him I changed my mind and he wouldn't be named after him but instead after my husband and father-in-law. I could tell he was disappointed, but he agreed that I was doing the right thing for our son. So for them to put me through that, robbing me of the chance to pick the name for our firstborn under the promise of he will want for nothing, and then to snatch it away because he wasn't the kind of namesake you wanted, because he was autistic, because he wasn't the perfect heir they imagined, and they expect me to bite my tongue and be okay with my son being screwed over. Hell no. We're going to be visiting my extended family for the summer next week. I'm going to have my friend mail it from a local post office a week or 2 after we leave, so there's not a trace back to us, and we'll see what unfolds from a distance. Edit: Jesus people. I get it. I will clean up the story. Look. I added periods. Are you happy now? Small update on same post a week later. Small update. I've taken the comments seriously, and I have formulated a plan to orchestrate this from the shadows. So far I've executed steps 1 and 2. My mill has 2 sisters. One lives only an hour away and has a drinking problem and loose lips after she's had a few. I figured if anyone had dirt on who Richard's biological father is, it would be her. I dropped by unexpectedly at Great Auntie's house with a nice bottle of tequila, and after a few she was in the golden state of being sober enough to accurately spill the tea but drunk enough to forget telling me. I've got a name and that he was local to the area. I've decided to hire a PI whom I just got off the phone with. I've asked him to find the guy and let me know when he does. I'll update with the next step once he's been found. Final update on same post a month later. Final update. I apologize for making everyone wait so long to close this saga. I was visiting my family when one of my children got very sick and was hospitalized for a week. They are doing well and we are home now and will be getting surgery to correct the problem soon, so there is no need to worry on that end. That being said, up until a few days ago my entire focus was on my child and their well-being, so I put all of this on the back burner. I found Richard's biological father fairly quickly via PI and requested that he collect an item with saliva on it and send it to a company with Richard's toothbrush I stole while visiting a few weeks ago before I left to see if they were in fact a paternal match before I put my plan into motion. I received confirmation via email and requested Richard's father's address from my PI and got to work. I called my friend and told her to expect a package in the mail and asked her if she could open it and put the sealed, addressed and stamped envelope in the mail for me, and she agreed. Inside that envelope was a letter I typed and printed from the hotel office area claiming to be my MIL and that I recently found out via DNA testing kit that my husband wasn't Richard's father and that the only other man it could be would be him. I told him that I had hired a PI to collect his DNA so that I and he had 100% proof of his paternity to Richard and the DNA was a match. I told him Richard wanted to meet him at least once so he could have some closure and offered him a large sum of money if he could make this happen. I then created a fake email account with my MIL name and told him if he was interested to email me. I also included the DNA test and paternity test results. A few more days passed and I had an email agreeing to meet. I emailed him telling him to come by my in-laws' house at the regularly scheduled weekly family dinner time. I told him that my husband was aware of the affair and has chosen to forgive me and that he will be present at the meeting to ensure that nothing happens between the two of us, and once Richard has closure my husband will write him the check and he is to leave and not contact me again. He told me that he understands and agreed, but that if Richard wanted to continue a relationship with him he would do it. He never had any children of his own when he was younger and was excited to learn he had a son. I told him that was Richard's choice but to never contact me or my husband again. I also told him to bring the paternity and DNA tests with him as Richard wanted to see them and I didn't have any extra copies. I gave him specific instructions to not knock or ring the doorbell since my daughter gets notifications on her phone when someone rings and she didn't need to know about him unless Richard wanted her to. I told him the door would be unlocked, it always is for family dinners, and we would be waiting in the dining room. In order to spare Rachel from being dragged into this any more than she has. I called her a few days earlier and told her that I had bought tickets to a show happening on the same night as the family dinner and had forgotten about them before I went on vacation and asked her if she and her husband would like the tickets. She said yes and thanked me and I went online and purchased 2 tickets and then texted them to her. The only wrench in my plan I didn't anticipate was being in the hospital with my child at the time that all hell broke loose. I was in the hospital with them for about 3 days while my husband was at the hotel with our other 2 when he got the call from File. Mill's affair partner shows up as scheduled with the DNA and paternity tests and thanks my MIL for arranging this meeting. He apologizes to my FIL for what he did so many years ago and that he hopes he can forgive him someday and then hands the papers to my Phil. He then goes to Richard and tells him he's so grateful that he wanted to meet him and asked if he had any questions for him. Mill doesn't say a word and is completely frozen and Richard has no idea why this man is shaking his hand trying to hug him as FIL is frantically flipping through the papers. Boom. File starts screaming and cursing and comes to Richard's bio father to hit him when Mill comes in between them and starts begging for forgiveness and that it was so long ago and she hasn't seen him in 20 plus years, etc. File screams at bio father to get out before he kills him and bio father takes off out the door. File flips his shit and calls MIL a lying wait zero re and to get out of house and to expect divorce paperwork from his attorney and she drops to her knees begging him not to do this and to think of Richard. File then turns to Richard and tells him that he's relieved that a lying stealing POS drug addict was never his son and tells him to get out and take his ex-wife with him. He then storms out of the dining room and starts packing all of MIL things and throwing them in the hall by the front door. Richard eventually takes his sobbing mother off the floor and leaves. After they're gone, File called my husband and told him what happened, followed by Richard. Richard says that Mill is with him at our house he's renting. He then demands that my husband abandon me and our sick child and fly home so that he can talk to his dad and fix things and that he doesn't want Mill living with him when he moves to his new house. My husband tells him no, that he will come home as scheduled and talk to File then and hang up. My husband then calls me and tells me what has happened and I ask him what he wants to do. He says he's okay and right now we're just going to focus on our family and we'll deal with this when we get home and we turn off our phones until then. We get home and I have a million missed calls from everyone. BL got drunk and showed up at FIL house later that night demanding he take her back and that she's his wife not his and it's his job to take care of her and that there isn't room for her at his new house. My FIL, as predicted, tells him that there is no new house now or ever, that only his son will ever inherit that house and to get out. BL then punched Phil and Phil called the cops and had him arrested. FIL froze all of the bank accounts so Miel couldn't bail him out. SIL finds out about this the next morning when Mill calls her freaking out that Richard never came home the night before and Fiel has blocked Mill's number so she can't call him. Rachel calls her dad and tells her what happened the night before and that Richard is in jail. Rachel then lets it slip that she already knew. He then asks if Richard or Mil knew and she tells him that they did and he told her he was disappointed that he didn't tell her the truth before and hangs up. Rachel called Mil and told her Richard was in jail and Mil tried to bail him out but couldn't because her cards were frozen and Sil asked her husband if he'd bail him out but he refused since her father and his father are business associates and that he's not going to get involved and that was that. Richard was in jail for a few days on assault charges when we got home and got caught up to speed on everything that happened. My husband went and bailed Richard out, solely for his niece's sake, and gave him a ride back to our rental home. He then went to Phil house so they could talk. Phil asked if he knew and my husband told him he did. Phil asked him why he didn't tell him the truth and my husband told him he wanted to but that his mom begged him not to and that she was sorry and that it would never happen again and that he wanted to protect both of them and his siblings from the pain of a divorce. Phil told him he understood and that his mother shouldn't have put that burden on him and that he doesn't know what he would have done if he was in his position but that he forgives him. He told Phil he bailed Richard out and Phil says he doesn't care and that my husband can be there for him as his brother but he's done having him for a son. He says that Richard knew for years that someone who wasn't his father had bailed him out and taken care of him again and Richard never appreciated it and that he was done. He asked Phil if he was really divorcing his mother and he said he was. If she had told him about the affair when it happened they maybe could have worked past it but she lied to him for decades and he can't forgive that, and he can't forgive that she passed off another man's child as his son. He's done with her and never wants to see either of them again. He then apologized to my husband about the house and that he knew it was wrong and that all of this has reminded him about the importance of keeping your vows or promises. He would have his attorney correct the will to its original state before filing divorce proceedings. Phil and Mil signed a prenup with an infidelity clause so she will get nothing she didn't come into the marriage with so she cannot interfere with the will or the house anymore. He did however request that my husband honor his request and not allow Mil or Richard access to the property. My husband agreed but said that he still needed to make sure that his mother was taken care of. Regardless of what happened she's still his mother. Phil then offered to build a mill suite at our rental home with Bill so she could have somewhere to live and someone could keep an eye on Richard and his kids. My husband asked if he would drop the charges against Richard for the sake of his kids and my Phil said he'd see what he could do about it. My husband thanked him for talking to him and that he'd see him again once our child was feeling better. My husband called my Mil who is still a wreck and told her what they talked about and about her moving in with Richard and she's lost it. My husband then reminded her of their prenup and that he had kept her secret for as long as he did and now he needed to stand with his dad and she reluctantly agreed. He also spoke to Richard who was also pissed off that he wouldn't be getting the property and now would have to share the house with his mother and my husband also reminded him that we bailed him out and are letting him live in our home at cost the least he can do for us and his mother is let her live here too. He also reluctantly agreed. Finally my husband called his sister to see how she was doing. She and Phil had a long talk and they're doing okay. He was disappointed that neither Rachel or my husband told her the truth and that hurts but that he still loves her and that he will always be there for her but that he just needs some time to work through things and he's going to call her and my husband when he's ready for us to have a family dinner again, but that we'd be going out to eat from now on. My husband and I had a long talk about how he feels and he says he feels good getting the weight off his chest and having it out in the open. He feels bad about his mom but that she made her choices and has to stand by them and that he will make sure that she is taken care of if Richard drops the ball. We aren't sure what that looks like yet but we'll cross the bridge when we get to it. I asked him how he felt about the will being reinstated and he said that he's relieved that we don't have to worry our son anymore and that he's grateful that everything worked out the way God intended it to. As for Richard's bio father, he emailed me after the dinner and asked what the hell happened and I told him my husband couldn't handle seeing the man who slept with his wife in person and lost it. He was free to reach out to Richard and arrange a meeting if he wanted to and to not contact me again. I sent him Richard's phone number and deleted the email address. I have no idea if they are in contact or have any current plans to meet. Thank you to everyone for following my story and for all of your advice. I hope I never have to do this ever again. Being a master manipulator just isn't for me and is quite frankly exhausting but for my son it will always be worth it. Now to the next story, story 2. My doctors told my husband and me that our baby has severe birth defects. I want to abort, but my husband does not. Original post, my doctors told my husband, 30M and I, 31F, that our baby has many birth defects. I want to abort, he does not. This was a planned baby and I'm absolutely devastated. Me and my husband met in college and have been married for 6 years now. We have one son who is now 4 years old. I know some people are gonna wonder, but yes we did discuss our moral political views before even getting engaged and we're both pro-choice. When we were 21 and 20 we made a stupid mistake that ended in a pregnancy. We were both flat broke and not at all ready for kids. I decided to terminate and he fully agreed with and supported me. He loves our son so much and is an amazing father. He confided in me that he loved the idea of having a daughter as well. Luckily we're in a good financial place, so I agreed and we started trying for a second baby. We conceived fairly quickly and were overjoyed. We also soon discovered that we're having a girl. My husband was so excited. As soon as he was told, he went all out and started to plan her nursery. He asked our son to help him pick which shade of pink he wanted, which crib to get, what the theme should be, etc. It was all so adorable. I don't want to reveal any personal medical history, so forgive me for being vague with the descriptions. At our last doctor's visit a few days ago, we were given the news that our daughter has severe birth defects. They think that she could possibly survive the birth, but any life that she gets to experience will be painful for her. There have been medical cases of babies with the same conditions to survive from early childhood to even the teenage years. These poor children suffer with so much pain and are uncomfortable their entire lives. They are very low functioning and need around-the-clock care as well as several uncomfortable surgeries to try and give them a better quality of life. We were both heartbroken and cried for hours together in the car. Then we drove home in silence. Neither of us said anything until my husband began to quietly mumble his thoughts. He was going on and on about how we needed to schedule another doctor's appointment so we know what medical equipment we'd need to buy for her, and we should renovate the nursery again so we could care for her more easily. He said that he'd definitely have to talk to his boss so he can take a longer paternity leave. He wants to be by her side in the NICU until we can take her home. He talked about how we'd have to ask his mom to babysit our son more often while she's a newborn. He even said that maybe we could sell one of our cars, move to a smaller house, and take our son out of private school so we'd have more money to pay for our daughter's care. I was silent until he asked me what I thought. I was blunt and said that I think we should terminate the pregnancy. Now I feel bad for saying it that way, but I was still frazzled from the news. This made him very upset. He began to cry and ask why I don't want our daughter, even with disabilities. I mentioned our previous abortion. He said it was different because it was unplanned and we had no way to take care of the child. Now, we're in a pretty good place financially, so theoretically we could shoulder the cost of our daughter. I have a bit of personal history with this type of situation. My best friend in high school was at my house all the time because her parents were way too busy with her severely autistic older brother. They did love her, but she was pushed to the side her entire childhood. I told him this story. He said that we'd do better by our son and daughter. My best friend's parents were stupid for having a second kid after they already had a disabled one. He then seemed hopeful for a minute and asked if I was just afraid. He promised that he'd be by my side the whole time and we could do this together. I told him it's not about fear. Our daughter will be in pain constantly if she's born alive. It would be a short and painful life for her. I love this baby so much already, I don't want her to suffer like that. He began to yell that even if she doesn't live long we could still pour our hearts and souls into making her life as fulfilling as possible. I didn't respond and he stormed inside. It's been a couple days now and he won't even look me in the eyes. He sits in the new nursery for hours. Our son is very confused. I know he's grieving, but I really don't want to go further with this pregnancy. I love him so much, I have no idea what to do now. TLDR, husband and I learned that our planned daughter has many birth defects that would devastate her quality of life. I want to abort in order to save her from an existence full of pain. My husband wants to keep her so we can love her for however long she lives. Update 1. My doctors told my husband, 30M, and I, 31F, that our baby has many birth defects. I want to abort, he does not. This was a planned baby and I'm absolutely devastated. Me and my husband met in college and have been married for 6 years now. We have one son who is now 4 years old. I know some people are gonna wonder, but yes, we did discuss our moral political views before even getting engaged and we're both pro-choice. When we were 21 and 20 we made a stupid mistake that ended in a pregnancy. We were both flat broke and not at all ready for kids. I decided to terminate and he fully agreed with and supported me. He loves our son so much and is an amazing father. He confided in me that he loved the idea of having a daughter as well. Luckily we're in a good financial place, so I agreed and we started trying for a second baby. We conceived fairly quickly and were overjoyed. We also soon discovered that we're having a girl. My husband was so excited. As soon as he was told, he went all out and started to plan her nursery. He asked our son to help him pick which shade of pink he wanted, which crib to get, what the theme should be, etc. It was all so adorable. I don't want to reveal any personal medical history, so forgive me for being vague with the descriptions. At our last doctor's visit a few days ago we were given the news that our daughter has severe birth defects. They think that she could possibly survive the birth, but any life that she gets to experience will be painful for her. There have been medical cases of babies with the same conditions to survive from early childhood to even the teenage years. These poor children suffer with so much pain and are uncomfortable their entire lives. They are very low functioning and need around-the-clock care, as well as several uncomfortable surgeries to try and give them a better quality of life. We were both heartbroken and cried for hours together in the car. Then we drove home in silence. Neither of us said anything until my husband began to quietly mumble his thoughts. He was going on and on about how we needed to schedule another doctor's appointment so we know what medical equipment we'd need to buy for her, and we should renovate the nursery again so we could care for her more easily. He said that he'd definitely have to talk to his boss so he can take a longer paternity leave. He wants to be by her side in the NICU until we can take her home. He talked about how we'd have to ask his mom to babysit our son more often while she's a newborn. He even said that maybe we could sell one of our cars, move to a smaller house, and take our son out of private school so we'd have more money to pay for our daughter's care. I was silent until he asked me what I thought. I was blunt and said that I think we should terminate the pregnancy. Now I feel bad for saying it that way, but I was still frazzled from the news. This made him very upset. He began to cry and ask why I don't want our daughter, even with disabilities. I mentioned our previous abortion. He said it was different because it was unplanned and we had no way to take care of the child. Now, we're in a pretty good place financially, so theoretically we could shoulder the cost of our daughter. I have a bit of personal history with this type of situation. My best friend in high school was at my house all the time because her parents were way too busy with her severely autistic older brother. They did love her, but she was pushed to the side her entire childhood. I told him this story. He said that we'd do better by our son and daughter. My best friend's parents were stupid for having a second kid after they already had a disabled one. He then seemed hopeful for a minute and asked if I was just afraid. He promised that he'd be by my side the whole time and we could do this together. I told him it's not about fear. Our daughter will be in pain constantly if she's born alive. It would be a short and painful life for her. I love this baby so much already, I don't want her to suffer like that. He began to yell that even if she doesn't live long we could still pour our hearts and souls into making her life as fulfilling as possible. I didn't respond and he stormed inside. It's been a couple days now and he won't even look me in the eyes. He sits in the new nursery for hours. Our son is very confused. I know he's grieving, but I really don't want to go further with this pregnancy. I love him so much, I have no idea what to do now. TLDR, husband and I learned that our planned daughter has many birth defects that would devastate her quality of life. I want to abort in order to save her from an existence full of pain. My husband wants to keep her so we can love her for however long she lives. Relevant comments. My daughter has a 20-year-old autistic bipolar daughter, my granddaughter. There are 3 daughters in total, one older and one younger. The autistic child cannot self-entertain and will always have the mentality of a 6-year-old child. My daughter's marriage fell apart and the ex-husband wasn't around to take any responsibility. Plus my daughter was rarely reimbursed for medical and dental out-of-pocket expenses. The oldest daughter, the glass child, was parentified so her mother could work nights. She now has gone no contact with her mother and blocked her everywhere due to her childhood losses. The younger child has lived in the shadow of the autistic sister and has many issues going on. My daughter can't leave the two of them at home because the older sister becomes violent. When toddlers, the youngest had to have her hair cut short because her autistic sister would pull her long hair out by the roots and rip her scalp all bloodied. It was awful. My daughter is movie star beautiful, but men who have professed their love for her and had wanted to marry her, but not the disabled daughter. My autistic granddaughter cannot self-entertain and is a Velcro person so is always there. It's been a family tragedy. My daughter is a prisoner in her own home. My ex-husband would not help. I work full-time and had gone to school at night so I was pretty much depleted. Plus, my autistic granddaughter is hard to keep. I love my granddaughter, but I would not wish her life or my daughter's life on my worst enemy. It hurts me to say this, but it would be a mercy to not bring this severely disabled child into the world. What a cruel thing to bring this unborn child into the world. The husband is out of his mind with grief and cannot see the whole picture. The wife needs to make up her own mind, even with the sad choice to divorce if it comes to it. To the haters out there, unless you have walked in another person's shoes, you cannot understand this catastrophic situation. I would also want to terminate. Can you guys talk to a therapist? Do you have time? OOP's reply. We have a bit of time, but if we don't resolve this soon termination will be impossible. Update 2. Thank you all so much for the advice and kind words. I'm sorry I haven't responded to many chats and comments. I've read through them all. The empathy and compassion shown is truly touching. After I made my original post, my husband and I rushed to get a second opinion. Nothing changed and it was still our original diagnosis. Once I learned that, I scheduled the termination for as soon as physically possible. I didn't tell my husband at first. He kept on raving about how we could give her as much love in her life as we can. I feel bad for this now, but I snapped and angrily told him I was terminating the pregnancy. That I know how he feels, but I will not allow my daughter to suffer just because he wants to love her. He was very angry with me after I put my foot down. After he realized his pleading wouldn't change my mind, he didn't speak a word to me. It was like he refused to even acknowledge my existence. I was terrified that he'd go and leave me all alone with the scraps of our family. I tried to explain it to my son, but I think he still doesn't understand. Then, the night before the procedure, he stepped into my room and apologized to everyone and promised to be more supportive of me from now on. I was so happy and relieved I started to sob and he held me all night. My original plan was that my mom would drive me to the hospital, then once it's done a close friend would take me home. Since it was only the night before, he said he couldn't miss a full day of work, but really wanted to drive me home. I agreed to let him and then the procedure was done in the morning. My son is having a long sleepover with my best friend's family. I don't want him to see me like this. The next morning the termination was done. It went fine with only minor physical pain, but the emotional toll was crushing. After I was done, he didn't show up to get me. I waited for hours and he wouldn't answer any of my calls. I ended up having to call a friend out from work to take me home. When we got there, I saw just one note on the counter saying he can't do this. A few of our daughter's special toys were removed from her nursery. My entire life has fallen apart in a matter of days. I asked my mom to watch my son for a little while. I still can't contact my husband. Everything feels so pointless. Relevant comments. I'm a doctor and I work in an ICU seeing children exactly like the one you may have had. If I were in your position, I would have done the same thing. Let me be clear and say that nobody in your partner's position has a clue of the emotional toll that parents of severely disabled children go through. Everyone thinks they know what it would be like, but they're often wrong, and more often the parents of the child are struggling a lot. Whatever happens, I think you made the harder, but smarter decision. Who's to say your husband wouldn't leave the exact same way after seeing your daughter suffer alive in actual pain? Leaves you a note on the table one night, I can't do this, and leaves you to care for her yourself. Considered as ongoing, for obvious reasons. Poor OP. Hoping this life crisis ends soon for her. Now to the next story, story 3. Karen demands to move in after blowing all her money on travel. Am I a jerk for refusing? So, I, 32M, possess a modest 3-bedroom house that I've been paying off for the past decade. It's not fancy, but it's mine and I'm proud of it. My sister, 29, and her husband, 31, are typical free-spirited individuals. They've always talked about leaving the rat race and enjoying life to the fullest, all that. They finally got it done a few months ago. They sold their house during a soaring market, expecting the profit to fund a year-long trip. They assumed they could make ends meet by traveling cheaply, staying in hostels or Airbnbs, and doing odd jobs on the side. At first, they stayed in fancier places and ate out frequently, believing they had enough of a cushion. However, they ran out of money after just 2 months. They misjudged how quickly bills would add up, especially with 2 children aged 8 and 5 to feed and care for. Now that their money has been depleted, they have chosen to discontinue full-time travel but do not want to settle down just yet. Instead, they wanted to stay with me rent-free for the next 10 months while they figure things out. They say they'll attempt to take occasional trips if they discover really good discounts, but they mostly want to stay at my house. I told them no. My house isn't big enough. I don't want the interruption, and I don't think it's fair for them to rely on me because their plan failed. I offered to help them find a cheap rental or even cover some of their expenditures for a few months until they could get back on their feet, but it wasn't enough. My sister yelled at me, accusing me of being selfish and jealous of their adventurous lifestyle. To make matters worse, my parents agree with her, claiming that family should support family and that I am being very rigid. My parents live in a small apartment and cannot accommodate my sister's family, which is probably why they are putting her on me. They stated I don't grasp the importance of experiences and should be more helpful. Some of our mutual acquaintances have also advised me to be more understanding, but I believe it is utterly ridiculous to expect me to house their entire family for nearly a year simply because they did not plan adequately. Now, on to the next story, story 4. Brother wants to bring his manipulative best friend to my wedding instead of his girlfriend, followed by a shocking accident. My brother, 29, has been with Leah for around 2 years. We all like her, she is quite nice. I'm getting married next April and have sent an invitation to my brother's apartment. We opted to extend invitations to homes rather than individuals. For example, our aunt received an invitation for her family, not for each individual. Last Thursday, we met at my parents' home. Due to tax considerations, there was only the core family, lol. While there, I asked my brother about Leah's dietary limitations. I know she is a vegetarian for health reasons and cannot consume some fresh vegetables. He stated she wasn't coming and that he'd be taking his girl best friend Amanda instead. Their relationship is now weird AF. Amanda, in my perspective, has always manipulated my brother. He continually denies having affections for her, but let us be honest here. Amanda would date other guys, blow off my brother, and then fall back in love with him when things were going bad with her prior relationships. Her previous boyfriend ended their relationship about the time my brother, his then girlfriend Amanda, and her ex were going to fly to Spain. What did my idiotic brother do? He went with Amanda alone because she was uncomfortable with his ex-girlfriend. Clearly he was caught off guard when his partner ended their relationship. I didn't say anything else because it was all so strange. So when he said that, I asked whether Leah had any other commitments, but my brother said Amanda had requested if she could come because it would be a chance to finally see the old gang. We were in the same friend group in high school. I told him I would have invited Amanda if I wanted her to go. Amanda is harsh and cold. She consistently makes derogatory remarks about other girls at every gathering. Around an hour in, she will create a commotion, either rushing away crying or sitting angry at a table, telling everyone to leave her alone before making a cryptic comment about something hurting her. I informed my brother that I was revoking his +1 and that Amanda would not be attending our wedding. He accused me of misogyny and bigotry because I don't understand opposite-sex friendships, which is ridiculous. My spouse refers to a female childhood friend as his best woman. I adore her too, she has been fantastic. She respects and always involves me. When I started seeing my fiancé, she made a concerted attempt to include me in the friend group. Anyway, I declared my decision definitive. He could take it or leave it, but I would invite Leah personally since I like her. He yelled at me, telling me to stay out of his business. I told him to get rid of his strange feelings for Amanda. He's upset with me. My father stated that wasn't our business, but my mother is upset with my brother. Edit. To answer a few questions, the invitation was addressed to the Smiths. Surprisingly, Leah shares the same last name as us. Granted, we have one of the most prevalent surnames. Yes, they live together. The tax issue is minor. My parents own a little business but are terrible at keeping track of all their receipts, so we go and help them every month. We digitize the receipts and enter them into bookkeeping software for the accountant. Update 1. I listen to *2 hot takes* on my commute every day, so your response to my message came as a big surprise. Thank you for your insight. Regarding the invitation, I now know I should not have stated it as inviting just one individual. I figured inviting households would be cute and less stressful for guests. Lesson learned LOL. I have an update to share. After the altercation, I did not hear from Leah or my brother for approximately 2 days. During that time, Amanda contacted me, angered by my Reddit post. She called me an expletive, and claimed that Leah isn't the only special woman in my brother's world. She insisted that neither Leah nor I had the right to be greedy with my brother's time, claiming that she existed before Leah or any of his lovers and would outlive them all. She concluded with the pompous assertion that she would undoubtedly see me at my wedding. I was fuming. I elected not to respond to her other insults, instead sending her a clear message. Hello Amanda. You are not welcome to my wedding. If you want to see the old crew, please set up a coffee date while they are all in town. If you attend the wedding, you will be escorted out amicably by staff or with police assistance. Please avoid contacting either myself or my husband. Amanda responded with more emails, primarily vague threats and name-calling, and used Instagram to indirectly target me. She tagged me in postings, making my username small so that people wouldn't know I was tagged but would see it in their alerts. She also utilized a Ask Me Anything sticker on her Instagram story, and I believe she asked herself leading questions. Highlights included inquiries like, "What's the perfect outfit for a wedding?" With a photo of herself in a frock captioned, "This, but sadly, I'll never get to use it." Another question was, "What is your pet peeve?" Followed by a diatribe on nosy people who believe they have the authority to regulate others. She inundated her story with depressing phrases about no longer having a girl's girl, tagging me in each one. Of course, I screenshotted them all. LOL. When Amanda began spreading a false tale, stating that I initially invited her but later disinvited her because Leah despises her and persuaded my brother to do the same, some people contacted me. The coolest part? No one believed her. Many of our former high school buddies have cut ties with Amanda, and the few guys who still talk to her have a stronger connection to my brother. They came out to inform me that Amanda was spreading misinformation. The girls in the group blocked her when she vented to them, prompting Amanda to blitz their phones. My brother worried, believing I had launched a campaign against her. Speaking of my brother, he called and contacted me several times, enraged that I had excluded Amanda and even blamed me for any harm she may have suffered. He also called our mother, claiming Amanda was despondent and threatening to never forgive me if anything happened to her. My mother encouraged him to call for a welfare check if he was truly concerned, because he, as an untrained individual, would be unprepared to manage such circumstances. The most significant development is that my brother was booted out of his shared residence. Leah contacted to suggest their relationship might not last and that she might not feel comfortable attending the wedding. I understood her decision and listened attentively. We met for coffee and she described their nasty dispute. Leah didn't mince words when it came to discussing the details. She made my brother read every communication between him and Amanda aloud and even sent a copy to one of her male friends, who responded, "Leah, WTF, this is not okay." She used this to demonstrate that their interactions were, at best, improper and, realistically, an emotional affair. When my brother urged her to stay, she questioned why, knowing that he would always choose Amanda. He said he wouldn't, but his quick reaction to Amanda's panicked phone about my bullying her demonstrated otherwise. Leah left, as he consoled Amanda in another room. Later, she texted him that he needed to get out while she was gone. It was her apartment, and she didn't want to see him until certain criteria were satisfied, including fully cutting Amanda out and seeking therapy to address his harmful tendencies. The fight lasted 2 grueling days. Leah found solace in your show in the comments section. She characterized it as both weird and useful. She extends her greetings and wants individuals in similar situations to know a few things. Don't be afraid to be alone, because being with someone who isn't right for you will make you feel even more lonely than being single. Never enter a relationship with a fixer mentality, as it frequently leads to heartbreak. Prioritize yourself, and while attempting to work things out is admirable, do not rely on it as the solution. That is pretty much all. It sounds complex, like a soap opera, but my daily life has been very quiet. I believe my brother needs to mature and either commit to Amanda or recognize that he is being played. Amanda, please grow up and leave me alone. We received a call last night. My brother was involved in an automobile accident while abroad. My father and I are on our way there. Getting plane tickets was nearly tough, so we've been driving since 5 a.m. He went on vacation with Amanda to clear their heads. Amanda did not even call us. I'm not sure if she's still with my brother or if she is also harmed. My brother's phone got destroyed, therefore he is unable to update us. The nurse, bless her soul, has kept us updated. He can't even speak to us. I believe I'm simply writing because I don't know what else to do. My father does not want to talk. I'm not sure if he's upset, worried, or both. I had never seen him with this expression. My brother is an idiot who has harmed many people because he is selfish, but I still do not want him to die. He's my brother. Thank goodness he is alive. Amanda isn't here. This week has been utterly dreadful. My brother is alive, but he is not doing well. We're quite concerned about the insurance situation. He and Amanda traveled to a place outside of the European Union, and he, of course, did not obtain travel insurance. We must now pay in advance and hope that his insurance would reimburse us, but we all know how that works. If they owe you money, you may not receive it for 8 to 18 business months. My mom and Leah are also trying to figure it out. Amanda visited the hospital yesterday. She hadn't fled, she simply needed to go to the police because of the vehicle accident. My brother is in the hospital due to sepsis, not the crash. A UTI developed into a kidney infection, which progressed to sepsis. They decided to go on vacation to let off steam. Around 4 days in, my brother began to feel warm and ill. Amanda said she offered to drive him to the ER, but he rejected. I am not sure if she is telling the truth, but this is the first time I have seen her be sincere. They went out drinking, and when they got home, he took medication to relieve the discomfort. Amanda couldn't tell me what it was, but she was concerned since you shouldn't mix medication and alcohol. They began arguing, and my brother passed out. I'm not sure why she didn't call an ambulance. She couldn't explain it to me either. But when my brother awoke, Mom loaded him into the car. Amanda claimed she panicked and crashed into a barrier as they approached the hospital. That is when my brother's phone, which he was holding, flew out the window. Amanda opted to rush into the clinic to get someone and stayed with the car until the cops arrived. They refused to let her in because she was not a member of the family. Instead of phoning us right away, she returned to their Airbnb and explained that she just wanted some time to comprehend things. She had to go to the police, pay for the damage, and then visit my brother. But here's when it becomes frustrating. Amanda decided she needed to clear her mind, so she left my brother in the hospital alone for a day. She checked into a neighboring hotel to recuperate. She didn't tell any of us where she was until she arrived at the hospital yesterday, appearing calm and as if everything was under control. When we questioned her about leaving my brother alone, she explained, "I simply needed some time to get myself together. It has been overwhelming." Meanwhile, my brother was lying in a hospital bed in a faraway nation, unable to reach us because his phone had been destroyed in the incident. We are now attempting to manage the complexities of getting him home and ensuring he receives the medical treatment he requires. Amanda, on the other hand, seemed to be more concerned about the impact of the circumstance on her mental health. She even shared a selfie from her hotel room with the remark, "Taking a much-needed break." It's been a nightmare, and Amanda's behavior, although not particularly malevolent, has contributed to the stress. We are doing everything we can to support my brother. My brother, on the other hand, is struggling both physically and mentally. He is concerned about the growing medical expenditures, his recuperation, and the strain this scenario has placed on our family. Furthermore, he fears Amanda is losing interest in him, which heightens his uneasiness. That's why we're being kind to Amanda, to prevent adding to my brother's worry. We're concentrating on getting him the finest care possible and getting him home safely. Now to the next story 5. My ex-wife came back after 5 years of divorce, asking for a second chance after abandoning our kids for a new lover. For context, my ex-wife Angela, 36, and I, 37, met in our mid-20s. I was about 24 and we met while working at the same firm. We married after 2 years of dating, and we had 2 kids, who are now 9 and 7 years old. The second pregnancy was unexpected, and she was unhappy with it, but she did not terminate it, even though I assured her it was fine if she did. I didn't want to make her go through anything she didn't want. Following our first daughter, everything was still going well between us, and we were as in love as ever, but that changed following our second pregnancy. Angela became extremely angry and nasty, constantly picking on me or our eldest. I assumed it was just hormones and attempted to reconcile with this new version of her. We expected things to improve over time, but things deteriorated, and my daughter and I learned to tread carefully around her. Angela was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom, but I was taking care of everything. She had stopped her career due to personal ambition after our first child, and she handled all of the housekeeping and cared for our eldest while I worked. However, once she became pregnant with our second child, we had to employ a housekeeper since she said she was too fatigued to perform the housekeeping and care for the children. Despite the fact that it was outside of our budget, I agreed to hire help because I did not want to inconvenience her during her pregnancy. I figured she'd go back to managing the house and the kids when our second daughter was born. To clarify, I was not one of those men who did nothing around the house. Despite my exhaustion, I always tried to help out at home after work. After the birth of our younger daughter, I expected Angela to recuperate in a few months, but several months passed with little improvement. She stayed unpleasant and irritable, refusing to do any housework. Instead, she would spend the day at home watching television. She didn't play with the kids or take them outside. Instead, she paid our neighbor to take them to the park on occasion. I didn't mean to sound resentful, but I was. I was working long hours to provide for our family, and she refused to perform even the bare minimum at home. It was becoming increasingly expensive to continue paying for the housekeeper, who was responsible for all of the cooking, cleaning and other activities. I also had to pay for all of our other bills and save money for our daughter's future, which was becoming increasingly difficult because Angela refused to help in any way. After nearly 6 months since our younger daughter's birth, I recognized we couldn't keep on like this. I decided to speak to Angela. I expected it to be a difficult conversation, so I asked my parents to watch our girls for the day. When I sat Angela down, I told her that I understood she was fatigued from 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to help me out and collaborate with me. I stated that employing a housekeeper was becoming prohibitively expensive, and I needed her to uphold her promise to return to handling at least part of the domestic chores so that we could cut the cleaner's hours and save money. She immediately rejected the suggestion, claiming she was too busy babysitting the kids to do any cleaning. She advised me to start working more instead of creating excuses and blaming her for our financial position. I attempted to explain to her that I was already doing my best, but she needed to do hers as well if we were to have a successful marriage. I also stated how she wasn't really looking after the kids because they were sitting in front of the television with her for hours, something the housekeeper had casually remarked to me. This was a mistake. Angela lashed out, accusing me of spying on her through the housekeeper. She went on a tirade, saying she couldn't take being pushed around by me anymore and refused to be forced to do all the work while I did nothing but sit at a desk for a few hours each day. She blamed me for our financial issues, saying it was embarrassing that I had to beg her for help when I was supposed to be the man of the house. It was nonsensical, and she was grabbing for straws to make it appear that there was nothing wrong with her refusal to contribute. We got into a huge quarrel, in which she labeled me a loser for not being able to hire a maid, and I replied by calling her a lazy cow. I mentioned that our eldest daughter was terrified of mom and that she was failing as a mother and wife. That remark really hit her, and she pushed me hard. I lost my equilibrium and fell on the coffee table, shattering the glass and injuring myself. I had to be brought to the emergency room, and Angela apologized and cried the entire time. Fortunately, my injuries were slight, but I could have been gravely injured. After that, I no longer trusted Angela and informed her she needed to move out. I didn't trust her around the kids, knowing she'd lose her temper with them as well. I requested my parents to look after our girls for a time, and Angela protested for a week, swearing she would never let anything like that happen again. But I simply couldn't trust her anymore. I was about to file for divorce, but Angela begged me for another opportunity. By the end of the week, we had decided that she would move in with her parents and begin therapy. Only once a medical professional determined that she was fit would I contemplate allowing her to return to live with us. It was obvious that something was wrong with her because happy individuals do not behave in that manner, but she was eager to work on improving, so I agreed to give her a chance. I also didn't want my girls to grow up without their mother, so I decided not to file for divorce straight away and to give our marriage another chance. We were also receiving marriage counseling while living separately. However, it was all for naught because she eventually cheated on me. My parents had moved in with me to help with my girls, while Angela remained with her folks. We attended weekly marriage counseling sessions and things appeared to be improving for a while. I also communicated with her therapist, who informed me that she was suffering from postpartum depression but was recovering. One of her symptoms was rage, which she had never felt before, but it spiraled out of control after she shoved me. That was a wake-up call to both of us. This continued on for over a year, and at the 6-month point, I let her visit our girls under my supervision. I was relieved to see that she was gradually returning to her old self. It finally seemed like our position was improving and that we could make it work. But then she abruptly quit attending our counseling sessions, with no explanation. She also stopped responding to me, but I was confident that she was making progress because her therapist kept me informed. It didn't make sense to me, and I tried to talk to her for weeks, but she just ignored me and said she needed time alone. Finally, after nearly 3 months of avoiding me, I decided to pay her a visit at her parents' home. I hadn't done it previously because her parents disliked me and blamed me, believing I was the one who drove their daughter insane and caused her to act out. Angela had informed me that it would be best if I did not see her while she was living with them since it would only cause more drama, the last thing we wanted. But I broke the norm and went anyway, because she had been behaving aloof and skipping counseling sessions. Even when she did show up, she appeared uninterested, and I couldn't figure out why. When I tried to talk to her in person, over the phone, or by text, she continued saying everything was okay, but her behavior indicated that she was hiding something. When I arrived at her parents' place, I anticipated her to be there, but she wasn't. When I asked where she was, her parents said they couldn't tell me and slammed the door in my face. I got awful feelings about it. I decided to phone Angela while standing in front of their house, but she did not answer. After a few attempts, I became increasingly paranoid, so I snuck around the home, hoping to discover a way in. I went to the backyard, knowing her parents normally kept the kitchen door open. But I didn't have to go that far. I spotted Angela seated on a swing in the garden, but she wasn't alone. She was kissing a man I didn't recognize. The image of that moment is ingrained in my mind since it was the most heinous experience of my life. I still remember it today. When the guy noticed me, he instantly pulled back, and by the time Angela turned around, I had begun walking back to my car. She caught up to me and tried to stop me, but I didn't listen. I was shocked. She attempted to grasp me, but I shrugged her off and warned her not to touch me. I got into my car and headed home. Once there, I blocked her on all platforms to keep her from explaining. I asked my parents to help me get a lawyer and told them what I had just observed. I did not see or hear from Angela until we had to meet with the court-appointed mediator to finalize our divorce settlement. By that point, I had essentially become a robot, only functioning for the benefit of my girls while emotionally shutting down. I felt nothing, not even when I learned that Angela was terminating her parental rights. She had decided she no longer wanted to be with us and instead wanted to be with the man I had seen her with. Let's call him Sean. He was her childhood buddy, and despite growing apart after high school, They reconnected when she returned to live with her parents. Apparently, she had fallen in love with him, and her parents were supportive, which explains why they had permitted her to make out with him in their garden despite the fact that she was married with 2 children. They had always wanted her to end up with Sean and were relieved she was finally choosing her happiness, as if she had ever done anything else. The divorce was a lengthy procedure. Despite her infidelity, Angela wished to qualify for alimony. It took time, but my lawyer and I worked hard to ensure she didn't receive anything in the divorce, which was understandable given that I had been the one paying for everything while she did nothing but watch television at home. It has been 5 years since the divorce was finalized, and we were successful in ensuring she walked away with nothing. The divorce months were the most difficult for me, but I knew I couldn't give up because I needed to care for my girls. They had nobody but me. My parents were extremely supportive, and I will never be able to express how grateful I am to them for being there while I balanced work and parenting. Now, 5 years later, I'm grateful for my divorce. Back then, it seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me, but I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't made that decision. Life has been good to me since then, and I'm in a much better place in every manner. We've moved into a larger house, I'm paid more, and I don't have to spend money on anyone other than myself and my girls. My parents live nearby and visit frequently, and I have friends that adore me. My daughters are as joyful as they can be. That's all a guy needs, and I'm grateful to the universe that everything is going well now. Or at least, it was until Angela reappeared a few days ago. The kids were in school, and I was about to leave for work when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw her standing outside with a boy beside her. He couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, and I knew immediately he was Angela's son. I was still trying to process her unexpected entrance when she began crying. She explained that she came there to apologize and make things right. She informed me she was finally ready to be a family again and give our marriage a second try. I couldn't believe she was back after all these years, and she wanted to give our marriage another shot, as if it were her choosing. I made up my mind in less than a second. I closed the door and turned her away. I didn't want to become involved in whatever it was, but first I told her that this was no longer her family. I'd quit being her husband the day she cheated on me with Sean. The divorce was simply a legal duty, and she had freely relinquished custody of her girls, so she no longer had the right to refer to us as her family. After that, I closed the door and instructed her to go since I did not want her anywhere near my property. I was so upset that I wanted to cuss her out, but I resisted because of the small guy. I could hear her screaming outside my door for a few minutes but ignored it. I departed for work once I was confident that everything was in order. I tried not to think about it because doing so would weaken my determination, which I couldn't afford. I almost forgot Angela had come to my house, but as soon as I got home from work, my parents called and demanded an explanation for why I had sent her away. They informed me that Angela had contacted them after I had shut the door on her, and she was upset. My parents stated that they had given her my new address and instructed her to come visit me because she was in the process of divorcing Sean and now had an opportunity to make things right with me. They stated Angela contacted them around a month ago, and the reunion had been planned for quite some time. My parents believed it was time for me to think about my children because my daughters needed a mother, and no one was more qualified than Angela. So they thought she deserved another shot and instructed her where to locate me and what to say. I was enraged with them. It was not their place to forgive her or give her another chance without first asking if I was comfortable with it. It could have been much worse if the kids had been home. It was reckless of them to do anything like this. I told them off, but they refused to recognize their error. They reminded me that they had assisted me during my divorce by caring for the children, something they still do on occasion. They argued that while it was ultimately my decision, they had an equal right to determine what was best for the children, which I could not take away. I thought it was crazy that they believed that. At the end of the day, my daughters were mine and not theirs. While I respected them and will always be grateful for what they did during my divorce, it was not their place to reintroduce Angela into my life. We had a fight, and they informed me that I was the one who was acting selfishly by not giving Angela a second chance. They argued that they had done their due research and that she was a different woman who deserved to be a part of my girl's life. Even when I informed them that Angela had signed away her parental rights, they were angry that I believed they would ever endanger my girls or me. They accused me of wrecking their lives because I was too arrogant to acknowledge that my daughters needed their mother. It's been a few days, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I don't think I was wrong or selfish for not giving my ex-wife a second chance at motherhood. Update 1. About a week has passed since Angela arrived at my door with her son, and I recently learned the truth about her relationship with my parents. It's so upsetting that I don't know where to start, and I'm still trying to digest it myself. It's mind-boggling how they've all betrayed me without blinking an eye. Apparently, not only did my parents give her my new address, but they had been in communication with her all along. I had cut her out of my life after the divorce, but they hadn't because they thought she'd come around eventually. They didn't talk very often, maybe once a month, but it was enough to make me feel betrayed. Sean had made Angela sign up her rights after she was presented with divorce papers. He issued her an ultimatum: abandon her family and create a new life with him, or stay in contact with her children and battle for custody. However, battling for custody required leaving him behind. According to my parents, it was a difficult decision for her, but she ultimately chose Sean and created a new family with him over her current family. My parents told me that immediately after I filed for divorce, Angela called them and asked for their assistance in keeping in touch with her children covertly. She stated that both of us had backed her into a corner. She believed that if she battled for custody, she would be unable to see her children. I was fighting for full custody with supervised visiting rights, but Sean had told her to abandon her children completely. Even if she went up against him and battled for custody, her chances of success were small given the circumstances of our divorce and her temper issues. Fighting felt like a waste of time and resources, as she risked losing Sean and custody of our girls if she went forward with it. That's when my folks stepped in. Angela visited with them privately and asked them to let her keep in touch with our daughters. She was aware that if she signed away her rights, she would forfeit any visitation rights. However, my parents would retain those rights, which they intended to exploit. They deceived me for years by meeting Angela with our daughters behind my back. They justified it by claiming that Angela's plight struck a chord with them and that they couldn't keep a mother away from her children. However, stabbing their own son in the back had no ill effects on their conscience. Whenever I left the kids at their house, my parents would invite Angela to spend time with them. My children never told me they were seeing their mother because my parents bribed them with presents and chocolates to remain silent. When I asked how they spent their time at their grandparents' place, my girls told me they played games with their grandparents and a friend. I'd always imagined they meant my parents' true friends. Apparently, my parents had told my daughters to refer to their mother as a friend, in case I questioned. I couldn't believe my girls had lied to me, but I forgive them because they are only children and have been influenced. When I found out the truth from my parents, I confronted my daughters, asking if they had met their mother behind my back. They started crying and said they couldn't tell me because God would punish them if they did. Angela and my parents must have instilled this terror in their minds, which explains their secrecy. I also felt like a terrible father for never asking my parents' friends who they were spending time with. It may have been someone considerably more deadly than Angela, and I might never have known. But now I am putting an end to it. I've already filed for a restraining order against each of them. I have written proof, since my parents explained everything to me via email a few days after our dispute. They expected the email to help me comprehend Angela's desire to remain a mother, but it only confirmed that everyone involved had been lying to me. It's also hilarious that Angela signed away her parental rights and had to see our children in secret, as if it were a crime, simply because Sean did not want her to have any contact with her previous family. He was supposed to be her one true love, but now they're getting divorced. They even have a son together, but Sean, according to my parents, no longer wants to be associated with either of them. He has a job offer and will be going away in a few months, but Angela does not want to leave because their son has begun kindergarten locally. That's why they've been battling for so long, and it all came to a climax 3 months ago when Sean informed her he'd had enough and was taking the job. This was supposed to make me feel terrible for Angela, but instead I believe justice has been done. I spoke with my lawyer, and the restraining order has been filed. My girls and I had a serious chat about everything, and I informed them that they would not be seeing their grandparents or mother for the time being. They appear to be fine with it, but we are going to therapy to work through it since I know it has been difficult for them and will likely continue to be, but it is over now. Update 2. Hello folks. Thank you very much for your care and support here. I am grateful that so many people have sent nice comments and blessings to my daughters. My parents and Angela have been served with restraining orders and are scheduled to appear in court in a few days. I'm not sure how they feel about any of this because I've blocked them on every conceivable platform. I've also instructed my pals not to contact them if they attempt to do so. I've also enhanced security around my property and have been working from home for a few days. I contacted my girls' school administration and notified them of the problem. Initially, I did not want to send them to school for a few days, but I did not want their education to suffer as a result of Angela and my parents. Teachers have been ordered to keep an eye on them and not allow anyone other than me to pick them up after school. I'm doing everything I can to keep them from getting to us, because I know they'll try. So far, so good, and I'm hopeful that once we receive the restraining order, they will continue to stay away. Update 3. Hello, this will be a brief update, But we received the restraining order for the next 5 years. All 3 of them must keep their distance from me and my daughters unless they want to suffer severe consequences. I'm still enforcing all of the security measures I put in place since the last time I saw them. They appeared angry, and I don't want to jeopardize anything. My girls and I are attending regular family counseling sessions, and I believe we will make significant improvement in the coming months. We have already made significant progress. Honestly, all I want is for my girls to be happy. Please keep sending us your best wishes. We need them. Now to the next story 6. Future Mill called me stupid and my fiancé laughed. Now I'm reconsidering the wedding. What should I do? Original post, I, 23F, am engaged to John, 24M. We have been together for 5 years. We want to get married in July 2025. I always thought that his family liked me because we get along well. He has 2 older brothers, 26M, 29M, both married. Honestly, I was very excited to have them all as my in-laws. They were always kind to me. Some kind of important information. About a year ago when I was scrolling on Instagram, I saw a profile that was kind of cringy but in a cute way. It was an older woman's profile who shared inspirational quotes. I remember one particular post and it was something in the lines of, "Only stupid people pretend to know everything. Don't pretend, just ask." Honestly, this quote changed me in a lot of ways. Before that I was always worried that I might embarrass myself if I didn't know something, and after reading that quote I realized that if I always pretend that I know everything then I'll miss out on actually getting to learn about things. So I decided to change my habits and start admitting that sometimes I genuinely don't know. Someone is talking about the war in Kosovo. Okay, sure, but first let me ask some questions so I can really understand what we're talking about. And I ask a lot of questions sometimes. I sometimes even open the Notes app and write in some questions that I later want to find answers to. These are my latest. How does time work in the black hole? Why do some snails have shells and others don't? What food is okay for ducks? How does the light bulb work? The old ones with gas inside them. Does everyone see colors the same? And how can we know that? Sorry for the long introduction, but it was kind of necessary for understanding what kind of person I am. I know that sometimes I might come across as annoying. Now on to the problem. His parents hosted a small barbecue last weekend only for the family. So it was the mom, 54F, dad, 59M, brothers, 26M, 29M, and their wives, 27F, 27F. I was the last person who showed up because I had to work late. I entered the house, and when I was walking towards the back of the house into the backyard I heard John's mom talking about me. To be honest, she wasn't talking about me, more like mocking me. I heard her say in a high-pitched voice, "How does the sun work? Where should I put the fork? Why does nobody like me? How do I wipe my ass?" I just stood there. I had this sinking feeling. I couldn't move, so I just stood there. And I heard them all laughing. One of the wives said, "I actually don't mind her always asking questions. I think it's cute." And it made me feel hopeful that they will say something like, "Yeah, sure, we're just playing. We love that." But none of them did. Instead the mom replied, "It's not cute, she's just stupid." After that they laughed again. I heard John laughing. My heart kind of broke at that moment because he didn't even say one positive thing. He didn't defend me. He just laughed. I quietly turned around and left the house. I texted John that I got sick and had to stay home. Now I'm wondering how I should approach this situation. We live together and I sleep in the guest bedroom for now, and I use the excuse that I don't want him to get sick from being around me. I can't ignore him forever and I can't pretend to be sick anymore, because it's been too long. I'm not sure how to proceed. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I'm considering talking to them about this, but I'm also worried that they won't be honest with me. I can't marry him if he really thinks I'm stupid. But I also can't marry into a family who thinks so little of me. But maybe it was a joke and I shouldn't take it so seriously. I'm so torn apart, and every day I convince myself a bit more that it's okay and sometimes we should all laugh about ourselves. Now I feel like I'm just going crazy. I would really appreciate some advice. TLDR, overheard future MEL calling me stupid and my fiancé laughed. Considering leaving him. I'm wondering if it might be just a joke and maybe a misunderstanding. Need advice on how to navigate the situation. Edit. There are many comments saying that they cannot stand people like me. I agree that sometimes I can be a bit too much with the questions, but with that being said I still think I'm within reason. I don't do it around people I just met. I rarely do it at parties or other gatherings. I usually do it with people who are close to me, who I think wouldn't judge me, or with people who specifically have knowledge about something and are willing to share it. If I'm a part of a conversation, I'm not rude and I'm not interrupting. I usually just ask 1 or 2 questions. If a discussion is about climate change, I'm not asking about monkeys, if you know what I'm saying. I'm also not a complete dumbass. I don't ask questions which generally would be considered dumb to other people. I just write in the notes and check answers later on the internet. I'm capable of reading, so I make good use of it. But after all, I still do ask questions a lot. Update post. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to people who reached out to answer my questions about black holes, snails, ducks, light bulbs and other stuff. I would love to have you as my friends. For the other people who said I should just shut up, I don't really care if you find me annoying or hard to be around. I'm okay with that. I don't exist to please everyone. I'm just here for a good time, have my own interests and learn. I didn't expect my post to gain so much attention, but I'm so grateful for the advice. Most of you told me to break up with him and at the very least confront him, so that's what I decided to do. You gave me a push and confidence to do it. But before I did that, I texted the wife of John's brother, the one who said she liked me asking questions. I asked if we could meet up for coffee. She said sure. We met and I didn't see the point in pretending to her that I didn't hear their conversation. So after some small talk I just said, I heard you all talking about me during the BBQ. She immediately got sad and said she felt embarrassed. She explained that it wasn't a joke, wasn't out of context, that it was just mean and hurtful. She said she's sorry for not defending me more, but I said that's okay and I understand. I told her that I don't blame her for anything, and just wanted to make sure that I understood the situation and see it for what it really was. And it really was laughing at me behind my back. Just bullying. At this point I just had to confront John. In my last post so many comments were saying that he will probably try gaslighting me. And you were right. We were having dinner together for the first time since the BBQ happened, because before I tried my best to avoid him. Yes, I know. Not very mature of me, but other than you guys I don't really have a strong support system. My family and best friends are hundreds of kilometers away. I only have 2 good friends here. I was so stressed I thought I'm going to pass out. My legs were shaking and I was terrified because I knew deep down that this is the moment when my 5-year relationship goes down the drain. I looked him in the eyes and asked, "How does the sun work?" He looked confused, so I followed with, "Where should I put my fork? Why does nobody like me?" At this point realization hit him and he started nervously laughing. I said I was there and I heard them. After the initial shock passed, he got mad. He said it's rude to eavesdrop. I said it's rude to bully people. He tried telling me that it was just a joke, that I shouldn't be so uptight. That it really was funny. I said that I didn't find it funny and went to the guest to calm down. He started panicking. He was asking me to please talk to him. He was much more apologetic and said that he will be 100% honest with me. I asked if his mother made similar comments before the BBQ. He said yes. I asked him if he ever defended me. He said he tries to. I don't know if I believe him. He told me he loves me and respects me. I don't know if I believe it either. I said that I love him too, but I need a break. He's all I ever knew. He was my first and only partner. I have no outside perspective of this. I have no experience. I need a moment to think. I will be going to my friend's house for a while to think everything through. The apartment has his name on the lease anyway. After I gathered some of my things and left, he kept texting me non-stop. He tried calling but I didn't respond. I was very hurt because he tried to belittle my feelings and only later when he realized that I might break up with him, started apologizing. The next day I decided to give him another chance to explain himself and I came back to the apartment. He seemed very sad and tired. He said that he told his mother that I overheard them. I said I don't care. It's his time to step up and show me that he cares. I'm not interested in an apology from his mother. I'm already done with her. I can't put up with this behavior and mocking me like we're in primary school. I saw a comment saying that probably her ego is hurting. I think it's true. She never got the chance or never had the desire to have an education. She is a very good homemaker, but outside of that she doesn't have many interests of her own. If I'm asking her about making tomato soup she will be talking for 30 minutes lecturing me about adding enough sugar, but not too much. She will lecture anyone who is willing to listen. But anytime someone is talking about something she's not familiar with, she gets defensive and tries to imply that nobody cares about that and if it's not relevant to her, it shouldn't be discussed. Once again he tried telling me that I should relax because it was only a joke and at this point I had enough. I took off my ring and told him that his behavior is a joke and I can't be the punchline. I told him that I wish him and his family the best and to look in the mirror to check if they really are as superior as they think they are. I said I'm going to be back with my friend soon to pick up the rest of my stuff and to not contact me again unless it's about moving my things out. And that's it, I'm done. Thank you all for the advice. Without you I wouldn't have the confidence to leave this man. I know I deserve better. I can't be with someone who can't stand up for me. And I wouldn't be able to feel comfortable around his family. So I'm done with the relationship. I hope they will treat his next girlfriend better. Thank you again on Reddit for advice. Relevant comments. Commenter, keep on being curious. Not judgmental. OOP. Same. I absolutely love that show. I watched it with my ex and it's funny that he didn't like Ted and thought that his character was not relatable and silly. TBH, we all should have Ted's strength and positivity sometimes. Commenter, OP your ex-mill can still go and get an education. Many have and there is still time. That's no excuse for what she did and her saying that and acting like that shows how uneducated she is. OP, I think so too. I believe it's never too late to start learning something new and continue education. In my uni there was an old lady in her 70s, who recently graduated and everyone was just so proud of her. In my country, university is free, so the barrier of entry isn't as bad as in the US for example. Update 2. It's been some time since I posted the last time so I thought I'm gonna give you guys a small update, because some people still keep messaging me. I appreciate all the kind words. So, I got my own apartment now. I lived with my friend for a while and she was an amazing support for me after the breakup, but now I have my own place closer to my university and work. Turns out my ex-fiancé didn't tell his family that we broke up. I blocked them all except for the ex, because we needed to keep in touch in order to get my stuff from the apartment that we shared. And nice Sil, and a week after the breakup she texted me and asked when I will come to the parents' house because everyone wants to apologize. I called her and said that we're no longer together and I don't really want their apology. She seemed shocked because my ex was telling them that, we're fine, she just needs some time. Sil told me that the family is still fighting over this whole ordeal and that the brothers are giving my ex a hard time about the situation. I told her nicely that I don't really want any updates. I like her, but I cannot put my energy towards following their every move. She told me she understands. I don't know what happened after that with them. I'm happy. I went on a date with a cute guy I met in a cafe but I'm taking everything slow and I don't want to rush any relationship. I'm not ready because just 3 months ago I was planning a wedding and right now I'm single and focusing on studying and work. When I graduate I want to adopt a kitten, and that's my only goal in terms of any big commitment right now. I also enrolled in CS50 by Harvard X and I recommend you all to try and learn something new today. If you have any questions then feel free to ask and I will try to answer in the comments. OOP's comments. Commenter, update us on the kitten please. OOP. I will for sure. I'm so excited. I wanted to get a cat for so long but my ex was against it. He didn't like cats. He was a dog person. I'm waiting till I graduate because I want to have more free time to actually take care of it. Commenter, this may sound like a lot, but consider adopting 2 together. 2 siblings or a bonded pair are not much more work than one and they entertain each other and are so fun to watch. My profile pic is of our kitten we adopted with his sister at the same time and it's great. Oop, oh okay, that's good to know, thanks. And your kitten is so cute, give him and his sister some scratches and pets from me. Commenter, part of a longer comment. May I ask if you have already gone and picked your stuff from his place and blocked him for good? Hope so for you to end the chapter more easily. OOP. Yeah, after a week and a half I was done picking up my stuff. I tried not to be petty and take my silverware for example and not give him a reason to get mad. I didn't want to come alone so I only went when my friend had the time to help me. He did get mad when I took my air fryer, he loved it more than anything, haha. I blocked him after I took everything that was mine. Ex's family. I think even though the brothers still think what the family said during the BBQ was funny, they are giving my ex a hard time because he let a good one go or something like that. They don't think they were in the wrong but they're making fun of him for not standing up for me and they're laughing at the fact that I broke up with him and he didn't even have the balls to tell them. One of them said that if someone called his wife stupid, he would defend her even if she would have done something dumb. Commenter, you don't have a Sil, law is literally in the title. OP, yeah it's just easier for people to read and understand. I didn't want to call her my fiancé brother's wife because that's long and awkward. Commenter, seems like you moved on very easily. From love to engaged and blocked within a few weeks. OOP, yeah, the love faded really fast. I didn't expect it. The attachment to him is still there, but I very quickly stopped feeling love for him when I fully realized that he sees me as stupid and at the very least not on his level. Now to the next story 7. Refused to babysit on the family vacation. Now my sister is furious. My parents are involved and the whole trip might be cancelled. At 23, I've often been assigned the roles of assistants and babysitter on family outings. I had to move out of my parents' house because I was constantly being forced to watch my 3 nephews. Last summer, we went on a family vacation to the seashore. I traveled with my parents, who paid for my hotel room. However, I had to share a room with 3 loud boys because my sister and her husband preferred a separate room. I was promised time to do my own thing throughout the vacation, but I ended up needing to help with the kids. I protested to everyone about it and was told that I was there for free. We only did one thing I wanted: visit an art gallery. I enjoy doing this anytime I'm at the coast, but the kids found it dull. This year, my parents have a beach trip planned for June, and they figured I'd be riding the same route as last year. I refused. I stated that I would drive myself and pay for my own hotel stay to have my own room. My parents were surprised and attempted to remind me of the cost. I told them not to worry. I have a nice job and a decent operating automobile, so I can easily afford it. That's when the but began. I enumerated the reasons why I will drive alone and pay for my own room. I want to enjoy my vacation as an adult rather than being treated like a child, like I was last year. My parents informed my sister, and she called to yell at me, saying I'd be spoiling the holiday if I was off doing my own thing while she had to wrangle her 3 boys. I ended myself ranting at her, pointing out how all she did last year was drag me into her mess. I didn't get to do much of what I wanted and was seen as the bad guy for simply wanting to go to an art gallery. I'm a grown man who deserves his own vacation. My sister has stopped speaking to me and my parents are still trying to persuade me to ride with them to keep the peace. I am still refusing, but the pressure is getting to me. Am I a jerk for not giving in? I know they'll struggle if they don't have someone to aid them. Edit. My sister, who appears to be a Reddit lurker, saw my post less than an hour after I wrote it. She's furious with me and upset that no one in the comments agrees with her. She went on a rant about how difficult it is to be a parent to triplets, and how the least I could do was help because I am young and unmarried. She stated she needed a break. I kept my position, and now she is contacting our parents to get them involved. I expect a call from them any minute. Update. Now that I'm off work, I can tell you more about what happened. To put it simply, it is over. My sister got our parents involved. They glanced at my post and were startled by the number of comments. Yes, they're upset with me for writing here, but I reminded them that if they'd just listened to me from the beginning, I wouldn't have had to. I'm tired of the keep the peace mentality that makes me a sacrifice for my sister. In turn, they went off on her, and the entire vacation was cancelled. The hotel hadn't been booked yet, but my parents are bickering with my sister, who is blaming me, and my nephews are sobbing because they won't be going to the beach. My sister contacted me at lunch and hinted that I have no life, therefore I have time to help her. I filmed that and informed our parents, which is what they are currently fighting about. Small update. I was not going to update again, but here's a little more. My parents claimed they would never force me to babysit my nephews again and agreed that what happened last year was unfair. They're currently furious with my sister for telling me that I should help her since she believes I have no life. My sister is playing the victim, while my brother-in-law is mainly out of the picture, spending his time at work. Thank you to everyone who commented. You made my day. Update 1. My parents apologized, but my sister didn't, at least not first. I created this throwaway account a week ago to see if I was the jerk. It turned out that I was anything but. I have too much to say to publish an update on AITA, so a friend suggested I come here. Posting on the jerk, literally opened a Pandora's box among the family. Basically, my parents and older sister were extremely comfortable with me assisting with the care of my young triplet nephews. I didn't leave home until I was 22 since I was attempting to save money while also attending college. A scholarship covered a lot, and living at home protected me from going into debt because I was also working part-time. I am very grateful for this. However, after college, everyone treated me as if I had limitless free time and persuaded me to accompany them on a family trip. During this so-called vacation, I was compelled to babysit my 3 6-year-old nephews. I had to share a motel room with them, and trust me, those youngsters didn't listen to a word I said. They did not behave the first night until I contacted their mother twice. Even so, I was considered the bad guy for wanting to do other things on the trip. It seemed as if it wasn't something the entire family enjoyed, it wouldn't happen. This was highly hypocritical because I too am family and was not involved in the voting. You can bet I discussed this issue with my parents following my previous post, and they admitted they were incorrect. After that dreadful vacation last year, I decided it was time to move out, and I did so before the summer was up. This astonished everyone because I gave them no notice. I obtained a terrific job very immediately after graduation owing to an internship, and I utilized the move as an excuse to reduce my commute from 45 minutes to 15. My sister despised it the most because it meant no more free babysitting on weekends, but she still attempted to force me to do it. I caved occasionally, usually after being tempted with pizza, and this became the new normal. But then, last month, my parents revealed plans for another family trip to the same location down the coast, and they essentially wanted everything to proceed the same way. I quickly recognized it for what it was, a trap. I knew that if I rode with my parents and allowed them to pay for the hotel rooms, I would be taken advantage of again. So I casually mentioned that I would drive and pay for myself, and that's when the storm began. When my parents realized they couldn't entrap me like previously, they turned to borderline begging, and my sister practically tried to force me to go along with the flow by gaslighting. Newsflash, I didn't. After refusing to give in to my sister's demands, I made the Am I the Jerk article following days of pestering. My sister discovered the post in less than an hour. What followed was Pandora's box. Initially, the family was against me. My sister called our parents, and they called me when I still had some time to talk in the morning. My folks were on the phone with me as they read my post. I inquired if they thought anything in the post was a lie. They skirted the issue by calling the piece an exaggeration, but I pointed out other elements that proved it to be rather accurate. Then I instructed them to check the remarks. There were already way too many to read. I kept refreshing the website on my own computer and informing them how many comments there were. Then I informed them I was weary of their approach to keeping the peace by pressuring me to please my sister. I mentioned I was out of time and that we would have to resume later. My parents were absolutely frightened that hundreds, if not thousands of people had commented in a matter of hours. Later, I informed them that the numbers had nearly doubled and were continuously increasing, which only added to their anguish. I guess they were forced to reflect on their own behavior. My sister tried to call me while I was at work, but my phone was set to mute until my lunch break, so she could only leave messages and texts. She was persistent and got through to me when I was eating my lunch. The gist of the talk was that my post had pushed our parents away from her side, and they were now angry with her. My parents canceled the entire vacation after their dispute. Yes, they eventually admitted that they simply passed the blame out of embarrassment and accepted full responsibility. They told me that no justification could justify making me their go-to free babysitter when I no longer lived at home. They attempted to backtrack a little by pointing out that they never charged me rent when I was in college, but I reminded them that children do not beg to be born, and I was working hard to make my own way. Then I mentioned that my father had the same advantage because his parents allowed him to live at home for free while in college. That very much ended whatever dispute my folks had left. When my sister called me at lunch, I explained the situation to her, and she revealed her true colors. She intimated that I had no life and that my free time on weekends should be spent assisting her because she is exhausted and unable to go out without her children unless they are being watched. She is a stay-at-home mother whose husband earns a respectable living. They reside in a decent house that is owned rather than rented. To be honest, my nephews aren't really my responsibility. They simply imposed them on me and expected it to stay that way. My sister abruptly hung up on me, but I had recorded the conversation and played it for my parents later. They were outraged and basically went to war with my sister. She dug her heels in, blamed me, and then reaffirmed her idea that my existence should center around her. I told her that was the most narcissistic and entitled thing she had ever said about me. It took days, but her husband eventually intervened and pushed her to apologize to me. I'd never seen her so intimidated by anyone, but she was on the point of tears. It was later revealed that one of the reasons I was the go-to babysitter was that my sister did not trust others. It was never about the money, or was it? My brother-in-law assumed my sister was paying me for the time I spent after her children after I moved out of my parents' home. She didn't even give me petrol money, just enough money to get pizza for myself and the kids and keep the rest. For months, my sister had been shortchanging me. He yelled at her when this came out during her half-hearted apologies, and she was obliged to pay me what she owed, all from her own savings, which she appeared to be upset about. Then my brother-in-law apologized to me for his own passivity in allowing my sister to walk all over me and vowed to get a regular babysitter from now on. Yes, it will cost them a little money, but my sister will be able to reclaim her date nights. Then there was the family meeting the other evening. We all convened at my parents' place, and everything was laid bare, with apologies all around. My parents reinstated the family vacation, and I still intend to drive myself and pay for my own hotel stay. If my sister tries to relegate me to childcare duties, I'll stay in an entirely different hotel. I've said this, and she has guaranteed me that it will not happen. If I don't post again after my vacation in another month or two, you'll know everything is fine. Update 2. My sister contacted me and demanded that I take down my posts. Knowing how far it has spread has made her much more upset than she was previously. Having a family that is aware of your Reddit account has its drawbacks. My sister called me yesterday after I got off work to see whether any comments were still pouring in. She stated that she cannot take the negativity of looking at them because all of the comments are harmful to her. I was brutally honest. At least 10 comments come in every day and the majority of them say the same thing about her. She began crying and requesting that I erase my Reddit postings, but I refused, telling her that she could cry to anybody she wanted, but the posts would remain since they were my promise that she would no longer treat me badly. After all, she felt like my life should revolve around hers, didn't pay me the babysitting money she was due, pocketed it for herself and forced me to be the continuous babysitter on last year's family vacation, so I had almost no pleasure at all. Is it any surprise that people dislike her so much after she treated me so badly? My sister yelled and hung off when I indicated that the posts had already spread to other websites since I had been approached a couple of times to allow an article about my position to be written, as well as some videos. My parents immediately contacted and begged me to take down the post. I declined, claiming that I only did this because they did not stand up for me. This would never have happened if they had told my sister to treat me as an equal rather than a servant. I am not her butler, babysitter, or handyman. I am her freaking brother and a mature man. Wouldn't they be bored of this bullshit if they were in my situation? They agreed, but asked me to take down the posts. I refused, saying I'd keep creating more if they didn't start standing up for me when my sister cried to them. Allow her to clean up her own messes, because their enabling of her has led to this. I didn't father those children. I have my own life, a new career and, ideally, a girlfriend. As there is someone I want to ask out. I am moving forward in my life and I will not be held back. They could either get out of my way or continue enabling my sister, but I warned them that the latter would end horribly for them. The only way for this Reddit post to stop is if the drama does. I've kept everything anonymous and I have the right to express my reasonable frustrations. My mother cried, and my father remained silent. I replied, "Tears don't move me. You know what it will take to put an end to this. Quit enabling my sister." My sister called me again, yelling that our parents had informed her they were no longer dealing with this and that she should figure it out on her own. Oh, and they told her to be kinder to me too. I imagined her eye twitching as she shouted within after hearing that. Be friendly to my little brother. What's this? Should I search it up on Google? Yeah, I was that sarcastic to her, but it made her weep too. When I hung up, my brother-in-law called me later to hear my side of the story. He was upset that I was still posting and that it had made his wife cry. I explained everything to him, and he promised to talk to my sister again. I'm hoping the drama stops here, but the family vacation is still scheduled for late June. I've already booked my room and requested a day off from work so that we can all travel on Friday. My room is also not near the ones that my parents, sister, Bill and nephews will use. In actuality, it is not on the same floor. When we go to the shore, if it is not a family activity, I will go where I want and do whatever I want. You can guarantee I'll visit those art galleries, eat local cuisine and simply relax for a change. Update 3. After the family vacation. The family vacation has come to an end, and as expected, some good and terrible things happened. The good news is that my parents refused to let my sister force me to babysit. Oh, she did try. The bad news is that my sister attempted to find out which room I was in, but she failed and got into trouble with her husband again. To begin, I informed the hotel ahead of time that they were not to disclose any of my personal information to anyone who inquired, with the exception of the police in the event of a major incident. They told me over the phone that they wouldn't tell anyone. On the day of our vacation, I left earlier than the rest of the family. I knew they wouldn't be able to move as a group until 10 a.m., so I left at 9 a.m. Check-in wasn't until 1 p.m., so I wanted to get a jump start. I sent out an FYI group text and took off like a shot to make the 3-hour drive. My parents were furious because they had planned a family brunch on the way, but I pointed out that I had never been informed of this, so it was cancelled in favor of fast food, as I had intended. I arrived at the hotel too early to check in, but I informed the desk staff that I was there to ensure that neither my parents nor my sister received any of my information. They claim they don't do it, but I told them I know it does happen on occasion, so I'm covering my ass. I informed them that they might be dealing with my mother, sister and 3 potentially weeping sons attempting to guilt them at the desk, and they should not give in. I wanted to know if they tried anything. They clumsily promised me that no one else would have access to my room. Then I decided to go out and get some food. When I returned more than an hour later, there were my parents' cars and Bill's large SUV. I walked to the desk to check in, first ensuring that the foyer was clear, which it was. I asked the clerk whether my family had inquired about me and where I was staying at the motel. They did, but the clerk refused to inform them. My sister supposedly tried to press it, but her husband silenced her. I checked in, walked to my room, and called my parents. I didn't disclose anything they tried with the cashier, and they also didn't mention it. Then we all got together as a family to tour about. My sister once asked me to watch her kids for a moment, and I said, hell no, since I knew precisely what she was doing. She'd pretend to be gone for a moment before disappearing for an hour. I called her out, and her husband warned her to quit trying to force me to care for their children. What did my sister do? She just started bawling on the spot, claiming she needed a break. Her husband chastised her, stating he was exhausted but didn't complain. My mother gave me a terrible look, so I went up to her and told her that if she believes I should be monitoring those kids, I'm leaving this family vacation right now. It is not my job, and I am weary of her and my sister acting as if it were. That made my mother weep as well, and she just kept saying, "You're right," over and over. This is another old ploy of hers. She tries to appear miserable in order to guilt me. But I simply said, "I am right," and walked away. My mother and sister did not try anything else for the remainder of the day. When we returned to the hotel after dinner, my family crowded the elevator, but I didn't join them. They questioned why, and I replied that I would wait for the next one. My sister stared at me, knowing exactly what I was doing. Then I sat in the lobby for 15 minutes, watching YouTube on my phone before taking the elevator up. I was on a different floor, on the opposite end of the hotel. I had a wonderful night, and the next morning, we all went out to breakfast, but I made sure they left first. I was the last to leave, just as I had been the previous night. Breakfast went well, and then I said that I was going to do my own thing for the day. My mother brought up plans to go to the aquarium and a couple of other places, so I agreed to meet them there, but the rest of the day was mine until family dinner. They accepted this, and the day went well. Back at the motel that evening, however, my sister caught me leaving my room. She must have been stalking the entire floor looking for me. I returned to my room to relax a little before supper because I was exhausted after walking so much. When I left my room to join them for dinner, my sister was just down the hall. She tried to corner me and accuse me of ruining her family vacation because it was now no different for her than being at home, with her kids to manage. I nicknamed it Bullpit because my parents were quite helpful to her. Then I informed her that I was sick of being her scapegoat, and it was already finished, so leave me alone and get on with your life. Then I began walking, while she yelled, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to you." I told her I didn't care and was going to supper. She accompanied me to the elevator, and we said nothing to one another. I didn't keep quiet about it though. I told my parents and brother-in-law that my sister had stalked me to find my room. She was scolded as a child. She had a pity party, but I encouraged her to stop it and grow up. The days when she could impose her will on me were over. Then I left the lobby and got into my car. This time I was the first one at dinner. When everyone else arrived, my sister appeared depressed, but nothing was spoken about what had happened before, which was good with me. My sister avoided making any contact with me during the evening. This time, I didn't care about riding in the elevator with the rest of them, and I told them straight out that unless there was an emergency, no one would come knocking on my door. I hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign for a reason. Everything went well on the final day. My sister and mother didn't disturb me at all. They had fully succumbed by this point. Yes, I did play with my nephews throughout the vacation. I am not a complete jerk. I did not stonewall them. I continued to be the fun uncle, but not the babysitter uncle. The children didn't appear to care, they just wanted to play. I also bought each of them a small baggie containing crystals and polished stones to take home as a souvenir. My sister and her husband had some minor arguments, but I didn't pay much attention to them. Overall, I'd call the vacation a success since it finally got home for my mother and sister that the old way of doing things with me was done, and I now have my own life. Update 4. Mother and sister viewed my last post. They don't know when to leave well enough alone. Hey mom and sis, I told you that if you didn't stop I'd go back to Reddit, and here I am. The short version is that when my mother and sister saw my last post, they freaked out. My sister had been following my account for days, knowing I would post. So what did she expect? That I'd simply say everyone had a wonderful time. She called and cried, claiming that I made her look like a bad mother. I responded, well, if the glass slipper fits. My sister continued to argue with me, but I asked her to point out any lies in the post. She attempted multiple times, but I pointed out that every detail was accurate. So what does she do? She calls mommy. Then my mother arrived at my door and demanded that I erase all of the posts. I told her no, and now I have additional ammunition. I ended up making her leave in tears. Later, I called my mother and father and simply told them that their enabling of my sister was the root cause of the prior family dynamic. I'll never go back to the way things were, so if they have any hope left, I'm extinguishing it forever. My parents then begged my sister, for the love of God, stop blaming me and leave me alone. They can't handle the stress of my revenge anymore. My sister had a literal no one loves me pity party, and my parents had to bring her back to reality. My brother-in-law hasn't called. I believe he's being neutral, but this can't be good for his marriage or my familial connection to him. Out of respect for my brother-in-law, I apologize, but your wife pushed me too far. Currently, my parents are asking that my sister get treatment since she cannot be a mother while also juggling her old habits. Woman up, as they say. In any case, I hope this will be my last post. Do you hear that, sis? If you don't stop thinking I should have been your personal slave, babysitter, watchdog and so on, and continue to act as if the entire world is against you because you can't lord over me, we can't be together. If you're willing, maybe we can get along and move on from this bullshit. Do not give me a reason to write anything else. From now on, I will only publish stuff about myself and the treatment I receive from others. Treat me as a nice human being, and this will be over. Capiche? Update. My parents and I had a long conversation in which they apologized, and we've decided that I'll keep my distance until Thanksgiving. I also had a man-to-man conversation with my brother-in-law last night over several cold beers. He warned my sister that she needed counseling or he would leave her, and they are currently looking for a counselor. He also told me that while my sister was an absolute devil to me at home, she is a really caring and endearing wife, albeit she admits that she enjoyed being an only kid. We are over a decade apart in age, so my sister harbored hatred for a long time and allowed it to build up. She's accepted that she does need counseling, and they'll go as soon as it's scheduled. They've also recruited a certified babysitter to care for my nephews. Aside from that, my brother-in-law stated that he was unhappy with me but did not intervene when I needed him, so we agreed that this was all simply a horrible situation that needed to be resolved. We're going to let it slumber in peace from now on. Finally, these posts helped me get a girlfriend. After reading them, the girl I loved suspected it was me and was waiting for me to say something. We'll be out on our first date tonight, so I want to thank everyone here for their overwhelming support. I truly needed it. Now to the next story 8. Am I the asshole for refusing to spend Halloween with my family after they ruined it for me years ago and now blame me for their DUI? Original post. As the title says, this happened on Halloween. I'm 25M and 5 years ago my parents wanted to go to my sister's house for Halloween. At the time I was still living with them, and I wanted to go to a party a friend was hosting. But my parents were adamant that I go with them instead because they wanted us all to be together. I still wanted to go to my friend's party and my parents suggested a compromise in which I go to my sister's party first. Then my friends. I figured it couldn't hurt to do both, so I agreed since I liked helping my nephews with trick-or-treating. And that year I was wearing an inflatable ninja costume I was really eager to have fun in. Well, I was ready and waiting in the costume for hours. And by the time we finally took the kids out, most houses stopped giving candy and there was hardly anybody walking around. And we only went around the block, that's it. Then when I wanted to go to my friend's house my parents guilted me into staying because they needed me as a designated driver. I would have driven them home first and then gone to my friend's party. But my parents just kept drinking and refused to leave. So I lost out on going to the other party and cussed my parents out for making me miss it and not even being able to enjoy my Halloween. They just said that it was too late and what could they do about it? They didn't even attempt to make it up to me. I refused to speak with them later. So they confronted me and I said I didn't even want to look at them because they broke their promise. Then I said that unless they could somehow pull a new Halloween party with all my friends out of their asses, then they had completely screwed me over. Then I left before they could say anything else to me. My friends were nearly as upset as I was, but my sister told me off and said I was callous because she had wanted me there. Ever since that year I only spent Halloween with friends. This year my parents begged me to go with them to my sister's instead. I asked why and they wanted me to drive them. So I refused and said they just wanted a designated driver. And they'd already screwed me over before and didn't even attempt to make it better back then. And I didn't want to just sit around watching them get drunk with the only real highlight being helping kids trick or treat. I hung out with my friends and we had a blast with a farmyard party, but my sister called me up on Monday furious at me because our parents were pulled over on their way home and got a DUI, and that this would have never happened if I had driven them. And now most of the family is pissed at me. So AITA for refusing to drive my parents to my sister's house for Halloween because of something they did 5 years ago. Relevant comments. Comment 1. While you're 100% NTA for anything your parents did, you are weirdly bitter about a party you missed as a 19-year-old dude. You were an adult, you chose to stay. Nothing was stopping you from leaving. You need to recognize that you are responsible for your own choices, something your family doesn't seem to be good at. OOP. No, I was stopped from leaving because I couldn't take my parents' vehicle. We rode together and they refused to let me just borrow their car and come back. The bitterness is because they lied to me and then showed no remorse that they did. Comment 2. This is weird. Have they just done it on these 2 Halloween parties? Or do they do this at other times? Why didn't your sister drive them? Or sister's partner if they're in the picture? If she has kids, there surely has to be a sober adult there. Obviously it's not your fault your parents drove drunk. NTA OOP. They've driven drunk several times. I didn't mind driving them to some places. But then they wanted me as a designated driver all the time. And they only wanted me to drive their car, not mine. So I made it clear to them that I wouldn't be their driver if I had plans. Which I did. Update. My sister and her husband spotted my post a few days after I made it and called me. My sister said she's ashamed of herself and now sees my point of view. At first she was furious I made the post. But her husband chewed her out for not ever sticking up for me because he really had no idea my parents treated me this badly. And after they both read the comments she realized how toxic this whole dynamic was. At first she blamed it on the stress of being a mother. But quickly took that back and said she really has no excuse for never considering me in these situations. We talked and she remarked how I've always loved Halloween ever since I was a little kid. And she let my parents ruin it for me that day 5 years ago, even though she knew about the promise they broke. The conversation got pretty emotional and she apologized heavily because she had put the blame on me when she was the one who let our parents drink and drive year after year. I've got more details now. And my mother is actually the one who got the DUI. I'd assumed our father. But he apparently was so wasted that he was on the verge of passing out, and pretty much did as soon as he was in the car. Our mother insisted that she was okay to drive and then ran a red light. That's how a cop spotted her and she was arrested. The car was impounded and our father was escorted home by police to sleep it off. He woke up with a raging hangover and a temper to match. Then took it all out on my sister over the phone, and she in turn took it out on me. Our mother has had her license suspended, the car cost them $600 to get out of impound, and both of my parents were putting this on me. Until we all ganged up on them for what they've been doing. Our father fought us every step of the way. But we made it clear they've been putting their alcoholism above everything else and we're tired of it because there have been a lot of broken promises from them all around. Our mother promised to do better, but our father just stayed silent and wouldn't make eye contact with any of us. Things are tense now. But I'm glad my sister is finally on my side in all of this. Now to the next story 9. My sister ruined my life by helping my ex-wife force me to pay child support for a child that isn't mine, while hiding her own affair. I'll start by saying that I truly despise my sister, albeit this wasn't always the case. She is my older sister, and as we grew up I admired her greatly. However, she has shown me throughout time that she can be a dreadful sister. My ex-wife Susie and I had been married for 2 years before I found she was cheating on me. The information came as a complete shock. I recall the moment well. I was browsing through her messages when I came across a chat in which she confessed to sexting with her male best friend for 8 years. Susie had always told me that he was merely a friend who had been in her life forever. Despite occasional envy, I had a great faith in her. We had established our relationship on trust, so when I unintentionally discovered the explicit text exchanges between them, I was completely taken aback. It felt as if the basis of all I thought in our marriage had crumbled in an instant. When I challenged her, she broke down and apologized profusely. She argued that it was only a one-time mistake and that her friend meant nothing to her in that sense. She vowed to block him and assure me that it would never happen again. Despite my rage and pain, I wanted to trust her. We began going to marriage counseling because I was terribly hurt by her betrayal and needed to understand why it happened and whether our marriage could be saved. Susie appeared to be truly sorry throughout counseling. She accepted responsibility for her misdeeds and worked diligently to recover my trust. For a time, it seemed like we were making significant progress. She was attentive, open, and willing to work to repair our connection. I decided to stay and give our marriage another opportunity because I still loved her and wanted to believe that people could change and relationships could be repaired. However, as you may have predicted, it was a huge error. After a while, I discovered that my ex-wife was attempting to meet up discreetly with her male closest friend. She had told me earlier that evening that she was going out with a coworker, but something about her demeanor looked off, and I had a nagging suspicion she was lying. I trusted my instincts and called the coworker after Susie departed to check in. To my dismay, they informed me that they had no plans with Susie. I felt a wave of sadness and confusion rush over me. It was becoming brutally evident that Susie was meeting up with this guy. Otherwise, she had no reason to deceive me. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal as I attempted to call her several times, but she disregarded each call. As the night progressed, I felt an increasing sense of dread and helplessness. She arrived home pretty late and utterly inebriated. I'd been waiting for her all evening, sitting on the couch in our living room, my head whirling with emotions. When she stepped through the door, she didn't acknowledge me. Instead, she stumbled past me on her way to the bedroom, as if I didn't exist. I sat there feeling invisible and completely saddened, understanding that the woman I once trusted and loved had become a stranger to me. Later, as I was about to fall asleep, I heard her phone beep on the bedside table, indicating a message notification. Susie had fallen asleep wearing her evening clothes, evidently too inebriated to change. I carefully covered her with a blanket and, filled with dread and curiosity, leaned over to see what message she had gotten. I knew the number right away. It belonged to him, her male acquaintance. My heart fell as I read the words. That was so much fun. We should do this more frequently. The message ended with a tongue and a sweat drop emoji, which made matters worse. I felt a rush of sickness come over me. There was no way a guy would send a message with those emojis unless something big had occurred between them. My mind raced with frightening thoughts of what they may have done. I felt ill to my stomach as I realized that my worst worries were probably true. I attempted to relax myself, but it was impossible. The betrayal felt like a real agony in my chest, and I couldn't get rid of the thought of them together. I couldn't get any sleep that night. I tossed and turned in bed, my mind filled with fear and grief. I kept repeating everything in my thoughts, wondering how it had gotten to this point and what I should do now. The night seemed long, and by the time daylight arrived, I knew nothing would ever be the same. When I confronted Susie about that night and how she had lied, she tried everything she could to avoid accepting responsibility. Initially, she attempted to manipulate and gaslight me, stating that my lack of trust was the real issue and that calling her coworker was a violation of her privacy. She accused me of being neurotic and unreasonable. Her attempts to gaslight me were difficult and unpleasant, but I refused to give in. I brought up the message he sent and demanded an explanation. She dismissed it, claiming that's just how friends talk to each other, and dubbed me crazy for reading too much into it. Her dismissive tone simply strengthened my drive to discover the truth. I chose to play my final card. I told her that if she didn't come clean, I'd approach him directly. This warning seemed to hit a chord. She became visibly uncomfortable and attempted to persuade me not to contact him, evidently concerned about the repercussions. Susie eventually broke down and confessed, despite her initial resistance and reluctance. She stated that she had wanted to meet him for a long time and that they did make out after becoming intoxicated. Her statement was like a blow in the gut, confirming my worst concerns and breaking any remaining faith in her. She proceeded to defend her behavior, claiming that our marriage had grown dull and she was looking for excitement elsewhere. I firmly objected, pointing out that her adultery and deception were the very reasons our marriage had deteriorated. I reminded her that it was hard to go back to normal after realizing she was sexting with another man. Despite her attempts to excuse her behavior, I held firm. I made it plain that she was solely responsible for breaking our vows and shattering the trust we had built. I voiced my severe displeasure and informed her that I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't just ignore her acts and pretend everything was fine. Susie, recognizing the enormity of the situation, started appealing for pardon. She admitted her issues but begged me not to abandon her, emphasizing her willingness to work on herself and our relationship. Despite her vows, I realized that our trust had been irreparably shattered. The damage was too severe now, and I realized that continuing would just prolong the inevitable. Her infidelity had left a chasm that we couldn't mend, and our marriage was irreparably destroyed. After learning this, I had to make the most difficult decision of my life: ask her to leave my house. Fortunately, we had a prenuptial agreement in place, so I was relieved that it would safeguard me from any potential financial consequences of our divorce. Despite her desperation and attempts to enlist her friends to encourage me to forgive her, I stayed firm in my decision and eventually booted her out onto the streets. I know this may seem harsh to read, but I was in too much suffering. I had always imagined that we would grow old together, but her betrayal left me devastated, and I knew I would never be the same again. I told my parents and older sister, about what had happened between me and Susie. They were astonished and disturbed by the news, as no one had expected Susie's behavior. They informed me of their support for divorcing her, which gave me some consolation. Here is the punctuated paragraph, logically divided into pieces. However, Na appeared abnormally silent throughout this, which struck me as peculiar. When I asked for her thoughts, given her strong friendship with Susie during our marriage, she answered unexpectedly. Instead of embracing my emotions of betrayal as a result of Susie's behavior, Na questioned if I was definite about divorcing her, pointing out that, unlike me, Susie had family support. Na's remark surprised me since it appeared like she was more concerned about Susie's well-being than the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. I answered sternly to Na, indicating that I didn't care about Susie's support system because she had decided to betray me multiple times through infidelity. I made it clear that Susie's well-being was no longer my concern, and I wondered why she seemed more concerned about my ex-wife than about me, her own brother. Na justified herself, stating that she was only concerned about me and did not want me to make rash decisions concerning my marriage. She stated that she had always believed Susie and I were meant for each other and that she was still shocked by our divorce. As a result, she inquired as to whether I will have any regrets in the future. While I found her remark weird at the time, I didn't think about it too much later. The entire situation was already emotionally draining, so I concentrated on getting through my divorce first. Initially, everything appeared to be going well for me during the divorce proceedings, and my lawyer was certain that we would win. But suddenly everything changed. Susie announced a bombshell: she was pregnant. This discovery really caught me off guard. I had not expected it at all. Clearly, life had other plans for me and intended to hurt me even more. Susie and her lawyer asked me to put the divorce procedures on hold after hearing this news. They stated that we should strive to resolve matters for the sake of our child. Susie insisted on providing our child with a conventional family upbringing. I was taken aback and instantly responded, declaring that I no longer cared about her wishes and that this child could not be mine. Susie responded by arguing that she had never been intimate with anybody other than me. She highlighted that just because she had a sexual encounter with her male closest friend that night did not mean she could become pregnant from him. She continued to encourage me to think about what was best for our child and to fight for our marriage for the sake of the baby. But I refused to be influenced. I realized this was a desperate attempt to derail the divorce process and guilt-trip me into staying with her so she could continue to live a luxury lifestyle on my money. Susie was clearly grabbing at straws, but I stayed firm in my determination to leave the marriage. I remained steadfast, arguing that the divorce will continue as planned. I stated that when Susie gave birth, I would schedule a paternity test to determine whether the child was mine or not. However, Susie's lawyer refuted our case, arguing that because Susie was still legally married to me and had declared that she had not been intimate with anyone else, I was automatically the father of the kid. They stated that they would seek child support from me as a result of this. My lawyer vehemently disagreed, arguing that such allegations were baseless without a paternity test. Unfortunately, we were all too aware of the flaws in our judicial system, particularly when it came to defending men in cases like this. Susie's lawyer later sued me for child support, offering proof to back up their allegation that Susie had not been intimate with anyone else. They presented me as a controlling freak who attempted to avoid paying child support and accepting responsibility for my acts. They even called in witnesses to testify on Susie's behalf. My older sister, Na, was among the witnesses, which shocked me. I had no idea she would even be present. Initially, I figured she was there to observe and support me, but to my surprise, she testified against me, claiming that she had been friends with Susie for a long time and was confident that Susie could not have betrayed me by sleeping with someone else. My sister said Susie was still in love with me. Na claimed unequivocally that she believed the child belonged to me. Hearing my sister back my ex-wife over me was terrible. Na knew how much I loved Susie and how much she had wounded me, yet she was there to defend her deceptive behavior. Later, once we were out of court, I confronted my sister about her surprise testimony. I voiced my amazement and betrayal, feeling absolutely taken aback by her behavior. Na, on the other hand, stayed firm in her choice, saying that she was doing the right thing and that I would come to respect her stance in the future. I raised my voice, expressing my contempt and outrage at her for placing me in a position where I would have to pay child support for a child whose paternity had not yet been established. Na argued that I shouldn't be so harsh to an unborn child and that I should consider Susie's financial hardships if I didn't pay her alimony or child support. She told me that I would never comprehend her point of view since I did not have parental instincts like women. She persuaded me to see that covering the child's fees was the least I could do in this scenario. My sister's point of view left me feeling exploited and very uneasy. I couldn't understand how she could prioritize Susie's money demands over my emotional pain. My parents were also disappointed at my sister, telling Na that she had no right to testify against me. However, the harm was already done. My own sister testifying against me demonstrated to the court that Susie could be telling the truth and that I was attempting to avoid responsibility for our child. As a result, the court found in favor of my ex-wife, awarding her child support for me until the child turned 18. I was enraged and refused to accept the sentence, but despite our best efforts, my lawyer and I were unable to persuade the court. My divorce from Susie has been final for quite some time, and I have continued to pay child support for her kid on a monthly basis. Despite the fact that a paternity test proves that the child is not mine, he bears no resemblance to me. The truth is that because my ex-wife became pregnant while we were still married, the child is legally my responsibility. I'm now required to continue paying until he reaches the age of 18. This is why during this journey, my animosity toward my sister has grown stronger than it has toward my ex-wife. I totally blame Na for putting me in this situation. This is why, despite my parents' repeated requests to forgive her and move on, I have kept utter silence toward my sister and refused to acknowledge her presence at family functions. Everyone in the family appreciates and understands my position. Several cousins and relatives share my hate for Na, so they keep their distance from her. Na has repeatedly complained to our parents about how I have isolated her from the rest of the family. She defends her conduct by claiming that she did what she believed was best for the child. However, her attempts to elicit compassion have continued to fall on deaf ears, as the rest of the family realizes her folly and supports my decision. Nina married her longtime lover Joshua last year. Despite receiving an invitation to the wedding, I declined to go. My parents then told me that many other family members did not attend, which disappointed Na. She and her spouse spent some time after their marriage attempting to conceive. My parents had expressed to me their joy at the idea of finally having a grandchild from our family. I recently had to travel to a nearby town for a work conference organized by my company. Following the conference, my co-workers and I decided to unwind and relax at the hotel bar in our leisure time. Imagine my astonishment when I noticed my sister sitting with an elderly gentleman at the pub. She hadn't noticed me, and I kept it that way since I was curious about her appearance in a late-night club out of town, especially since she was married. I watched as she came in closer to the elderly man and murmured something into his ear that made him giggle. My suspicions intensified as they appeared to be flirting and acting unusually comfortable with each other. Without thinking about it, I reflexively reached for my phone and silently took a few photos. I took care to get clear images of my sister's and the older gentleman's faces, as I wanted incontrovertible confirmation of what I was seeing. As I saw them together at the bar, my mind raced with amazement and confusion. How could my married sister find herself in such a compromising situation? I watched in surprise as Na and the man continued their intimate talk, exchanging grins and laughter. After approximately an hour, the man motioned for Na to follow him to his room. She nodded and stood up to join him. My eyes widened as the truth of the scenario dawned on me and I realized I was seeing my sister prepare to cheat on her husband. I wanted to yell at her to stop, but from previous experience, I knew that cheats never learn from their mistakes. Instead, they must be given a lesson. After returning home, I decided to contact her husband, Joshua, personally. I believed it was necessary for him to know the truth rather than being caught off guard like I was. I located him on Facebook and made him a friend request, hoping he'd accept. After a few hours, I checked and discovered that he had accepted my request, so I instantly messaged him. In the message, I introduced myself as Nina's brother and stated that we needed to have an important chat. I requested him not to tell my sister about my text to him and gave him my phone number so he could contact me. I hoped he'd listen to what I had to say and waited impatiently for his call. A few minutes later, he called to ask why I had contacted him. He stated that he was already aware of me through Na and my parents, but was astonished that I had contacted him after all this time. I apologized to him for missing their wedding and expressed my concern that we were speaking under such circumstances. He then inquired what was wrong, and I honestly described what I had witnessed in the hotel between Noah and the older gentleman. I hesitated from immediately using the word cheating, because I wasn't sure if Na and he had an open marriage or not, and I didn't want to make assumptions. However, as I recounted the events to Joshua, he began probing with various questions regarding Na's attire and who the other man was, indicating obvious discomfort. To back up my story, I said that I had taken photographs of her with the gentleman, as I found it difficult to believe myself. I immediately shared those photographs with him to provide actual proof of what I had experienced. He was clearly moved by the revelation of Nina's infidelity and was wrestling with the seriousness of the situation. After a lengthy pause, he suddenly expressed gratitude for my candor and asked why I would go out of my way to assist him, given that we were virtually strangers and I no longer had a relationship with Na. His query struck a chord, prompting me to share my own experience, explaining how I had been in his shoes when my ex-wife cheated on me. As I probed more into the circumstances, I explained how Na had exacerbated my agony by testifying against me, resulting in my current burden of paying child support for a child who was not even mine. Joshua remained quiet for a few minutes after hearing my story. He then revealed that Na told him an entirely different version of the truth. Susie and my marriage, she claimed, were already faltering. And we had ceased being affectionate, prompting Susie to make a one-time error that allegedly led to our split. I was furious after hearing this distortion of truth, and I explained to Joshua that Susie had cheated on me twice, demonstrating that our divorce was not the result of a single error, but of her continually breaking my trust with her male buddy. To my relief, Joshua believed me and appreciated my candor in exposing my sister's dishonest actions. He informed me that he had no intention of staying with a cheating partner and planned to discuss this with Nina. In the days that followed, my parents regularly called to accuse me of wrecking Nina's life, since she was going through a divorce. They accused me of intruding unduly in her marriage and voiced disappointment at not being able to have a grandchild from her. Following this, I did not hold back in the dispute. I refuted their claims by explaining that it was not my responsibility that their daughter was unfaithful in her marriage. I suggested that instead of focusing on the prospect of having a grandchild, they should concentrate on teaching my sister better values and morals so she might become a better person. Na also sent me a derogatory text, accusing me of being a bitter young boy who couldn't keep his nose out of other people's business. She even said that Susie's infidelity during my marriage was legitimate, and that I deserved everything that had occurred to me. Her message enraged me, and it took me several hours to calm down after reading it. However, fate appeared to have its own way of balancing things, as I recently discovered that Na is presumably pregnant. She claims Joshua is the father, but he refuses to accept any responsibility. Joshua has contacted me, requesting that I testify for him when the case eventually goes to court, as I was the one who took those incriminating photos of Na and the other man. I accepted without hesitation. Not only to exact revenge on my sister, but also out of sympathy for Joshua. I do not want another man to go through the anguish and betrayal that I did with my ex-wife. Since then, my parents and Nina have persistently pressed me not to testify for Joshua. They continue to emphasize that family comes first. I can't help but find their sentiments amusing, especially since Na didn't emphasize family when it came to me. I am determined to teach my sister a lesson and guarantee that her husband does not meet the same fate as I did. Update 1. I'm shocked at how polarized everyone's reactions to my post are. I can't believe a few women are attempting to persuade me to support my sister, even though she has blatantly cheated. I say, shame on you. Believe me, I would have had no issues if my ex-wife had requested child support after demonstrating that the child was mine. But she didn't. She knew the child wasn't mine because we weren't even intimate at the time. As a result, she willfully forced me to accept responsibility for it because she couldn't pay it on her own. I couldn't show that she had intimate connections with that other guy because there was no evidence other than the text I discovered. As a result, I despise my sister Na for deceiving me and testifying for my ex-wife. However, now that Na is also manipulating her husband, I will not stand for it. I will testify against her and ensure that Joshua does not suffer the same fate. If it is discovered after the child is born that Joshua is the father, I am confident that he will step forward because he appears to be a lovely guy. But, until that is confirmed, why should a husband be required to pay child support when his wife has clearly been sleeping with other men? Na has expressed no guilt for her infidelity or for being the cause of her marriage's dissolution. Unlike my marriage, Joshua and Nina do not have a prenuptial agreement, which means he may be required to pay her alimony. On top of that, I feel he should not be required to pay child support for a child who is not his. I believe I'm doing the right thing, and I'm pleased that the majority of the comments support my decision. Update 2. It's been a long time since I posted anything here. Today, I testified against my sister in court. I described what I had seen her do with the older man, showing all of the proof and images. I could feel my sister's angry stare on me the entire time, but I remained determined. Despite her lawyer's attempts to discredit my testimony by suggesting I harbored a grudge against my sister, the judge accepted its credibility. I hope my testimony has a favorable impact on Joshua's case and that he is not required to pay child support, but the conclusion remains to be seen. In the midst of it all, my relationship with my parents has deteriorated. My mother called me, her voice strangled with tears, after learning that I had followed through on my pledge to testify against my sister. She was plainly disappointed, telling me that she and my father hoped I wouldn't do such a thing to my sister. As I listened, I couldn't help but become frustrated. I reminded her that they had never battled for me so hard when my sister had done the same thing to me during my divorce, and that they had even forgiven her for everything. Yet here she was calling me a letdown and wailing as if my troubles and pains were insignificant in comparison to my sister's. I informed my mother that it was unfair for them to chastise me for standing up for what was right and expressing the truth, especially because they had previously failed to support me. It seemed like a betrayal, and I made it obvious that I did not need them or my father in my life if they were going to favor my unfaithful sister over me. Since then, I've stopped talking to my parents and refused to answer their calls or respond to their messages. Update 3. I am returning with an update on my sister's predicament. I'm happy to say that Joshua has been exonerated of paying child support to my sister. I'm sure Na is upset. I can't help but feel relieved knowing that at least one person was spared the unjust weight that so many others, including myself, have had to bear. To clarify a few more points. No, I don't have a relationship with Susie's son. Even though I still pay child support. If the son grows up and contacts me, I will not hesitate to tell him the truth about his mother. Yes, my parents and I are still not communicating. And to be honest, I have felt much lighter and more comfortable since they stopped contacting me every other day and blaming me for not supporting my sister. Nah, she won't dare confront me since I'm sure she's still embarrassed that I testified against her. Also, yes, she will receive alimony from Joshua as we expected. No, my parents do not have a relationship with Susie's son because they know he is not my child. I'm not sure if they'll accept Nina's child, but maybe they will. That is all. Now to the next story 10. My grandmother bought me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mother tried to take it away to appease her new fiancé. Hello everyone, so I just turned 15 3 days ago and my grandmother gave me a very rare and lovely gift. She handed ownership of her penthouse apartment to me. My grandmother does not reside there. She lives in the suburbs but has owned the apartment for a few years and visits occasionally when she wants to be closer to the city. I was overjoyed because the previous year and a half had been a nightmare for me. First, my father abandoned our family. Even though Dad had always been a workaholic with no time for me or my mother, this still surprised me. My mother didn't even tell me about it until my father quietly walked out of the house over a year ago. Apparently, by the time they told me about it, they had already filed for divorce, and my parents had decided that they couldn't live together any longer because my father was simply too burdened. I don't know what overwhelmed him. He did not even say goodbye to me in person. He texted me one more time after he moved out, telling me to be fine. That was it. I didn't see him after that. And my parents eventually separated. Because our state does not have a significant waiting time, my mother was able to maintain the house and have complete custody of my brother and me. My dad had visiting rights, but he hasn't used them yet, so I'm not sure what's going on. As if that wasn't awful enough, my mother informed me around 2 months ago that she had been dating this guy, let's call him Robert, for about 3 months. They were in love, and she didn't want to waste time because she was getting older, so they got engaged. I barely had time to grasp the fact that my mother was seeing someone new. During the same conversation, she told me she was engaged and that this person would be my stepfather. It was a lot to take in, and I was disappointed since I thought 5 months was insufficient time to learn about her fiancé. But she said I didn't need to worry about it. She introduced me to him 2 weeks later, and he appeared quite closed off and aloof with me. However, he acted completely differently with my brother and was very playful with him. At the time I assumed it was because my brother was just 4 years old, making it simpler to play with him. But a few weeks later, my mother said something that radically altered my opinion of both of them. My mother asked me to sit down with her 2 weeks ago and told me that the reason she and her fiancé got engaged so quickly was because he had been offered a really wonderful position and was going to accept it. However, in order to do so, they would need to relocate and live outside of the state. They meant to leave me here with my grandmother since my mother did not believe I would want to leave everything behind with them. I told her that if it meant staying with her, I would be willing to move away because I had previously experienced my father walking out on me and did not want to go through the same with my mother. However, she attempted to persuade me that it was a poor choice because my school, friends, and happiness were all present. Nevertheless, I insisted on accompanying her. Eventually, she revealed the true reason. Robert only wanted my younger brother to accompany them because he was still young and could develop a relationship with him. She said I was too old and Robert would never consider me his daughter. He didn't like the idea that I thought 5 months was too soon for them to get engaged, and he felt I was mentally trapped in the past when my parents were still married. My mother believed this as well, which is why she wanted me to stay behind and figure things out for myself. This discovery left me extremely hurt. I expected my mother to support me, not forsake me because Robert wanted her to. I didn't mind living with my grandmother since she's a beautiful person who I adore, but I also adore my mother. I attempted to fight, but it felt meaningless, so I told her I wanted to move in with my grandma right now. Of course, moving out that day was not an option, but within a few days, I had packed and was ready to depart. My mother attempted to tell me that she still loved me, but it seemed like she was only looking out for herself, hoping for a chance at happiness with Robert. I didn't speak to her during my last few days at home, and I didn't say goodbye when I left. The only person I bid goodbye to was my younger brother, who I knew I would miss. Since then I've been living with my grandmother, who has been quite kind and sensitive. For reference, my grandmother is my mother's mother. I had no interaction with my paternal grandparents, and they had no contact with my father. Aside from the long trip to school, life with my grandmother has been very straightforward thus far. She adores me and believes what my mother did was terrible. I keep in touch with my brother by phoning my mother's phone every evening. But we don't talk, it's just to speak with him. My birthday was 3 days ago, and I celebrated it at home. To be fair, I did not organize the party. My grandmother did. She surprised me by bringing some of my closest schoolmates and a few select relatives. I was feeling extremely down after my mother left me off here, but the celebration lifted my spirits. I had been feeling really down since my mother dropped me off. However, after we cut the cake, my grandma revealed the gift she prepared for me, which was a huge surprise. She told me that her lawyer would function as trustee for the property for the time being, but that once I turned 18, I would own everything. That was the finest news I had heard in a long time, and I had no intention of sharing it with my mother. Yesterday, however, I discovered that my mother had been notified about the present, most likely by someone at the party. I'm not sure who it was, and it doesn't matter now. But I was irritated when she called me last evening. She informed me she had heard about the gift from my grandmother, and after meeting with Robert, they had decided he wanted to adopt me if I convinced my grandma to transfer ownership of the property to him. I'm not sure why, but she expected me to be delighted at the news because it meant I could finally join them. But I wasn't pleased at all. I told her that I was not going to do anything like that and that she no longer needed to call me. Then I hung up. A few minutes later, she called me again, but I didn't answer. Then she texted me, and this is what she sent. I'm sorry if you felt horrible because I was trying to play by Robert's rules and live life on his terms, but you must understand that after your father and I separated, he was the only person who truly cared for me. Of course, I had my family's backing, but that was different. He was there for me, both emotionally and financially. You are unaware of it because I have never allowed you to experience it or spoken to you about it because I do not want you to have a negative attitude toward your father. But he's not a really generous man. The settlement and alimony I'm receiving from him are completely inadequate, and the child support is absurdly low. I hope you haven't forgotten that your father, not me, was our family's principal breadwinner. I'm grateful that he left the house to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to pay rent. You are aware that our lifestyle has always been extremely expensive. I never had to be concerned about money when I was with your father, but after he left things changed, and I couldn't let you feel that. Even after working extra shifts, I couldn't match your father's income. When I first started dating Robert, he was the one who supported me and took the initiative. I know he hasn't been very nice to you, but that's because he's been in previous partnerships where children were a source of dispute, eventually leading to a separation. We have to consider his trauma as well. I knew my mother would take excellent care of you, so I felt comfortable leaving you with her. It's not as if I abandoned you. You were living with your grandma, and you knew she would never make you feel alone. I only wish you could consider my happiness. Now that I've arranged for you to join us, I want you to take us up on our offer and do what Robert expects so that we can be together. Your brother misses you greatly. I understand you're angry, but I also know you love me and I love you. Please respond shortly. I love you. That message gave me pause, but the last bit really got to me. She expected me to do everything Robert asked simply because she wanted to. It was stupid, entitled and ineffective. I believed my mother had lost her uniqueness. So while the letter initially comforted me, it gradually left a bitter taste in my mouth. After half an hour I told her that I would not do whatever Robert had asked of me and that she may leave with him and leave me with my grandma as she had planned. I had nothing else to say to her because, frankly, her behavior was disappointing. When I asked my grandmother about it, she said that no matter what happens, she will not transfer title of the land to Robert since she hardly knows him and does not trust him. She was confident that he would simply sell the apartment and leave me with nothing. So in some ways, I'm glad I didn't accept my mother's request. However, my mother would not take no for an answer. This morning, she arrived at my grandmother's house with my brother. Fortunately, I was at school when she stopped by. When I arrived home and spotted her in the living room, my grandmother wasted no time in explaining the reason for my mother's visit. My grandmother informed me that she had come to talk to me in person about the proposition she had made last night, which I had obviously neglected. I explained that I had not ignored anything. I responded to my mother's message and was quite clear about what I wanted. I wanted her to stick to her original plan because I was not going to persuade my grandma to transfer the land to Robert. We didn't trust him. I made my position plain, so I didn't see why she was still puzzled. I was rude and had a strong tone, but can you blame me? Anyway, my mother began crying and stated that she was simply trying to make everyone happy, but no matter how hard she tried, it didn't work. I was upset because she was crying when it should have been me. After all, I was the one being treated poorly by both of my parents. I told her to cut it out, and she had it absolutely backwards. She wasn't trying to make everyone happy. She was just trying to make herself happy and expecting everyone else to go out of their way to accommodate her. Perhaps everyone else was willing to do so, but not me. I had a life ahead of me, and I wasn't going to waste it by racing after her to make sure she was okay. That took her by surprise, and she quickly departed. Later, I noticed she had blocked me and I now feel horrible about what I said. So I'd like to ask, am I a jerk, AITA, for telling my mother that she was selfish and just concerned with her own happiness? Update 1. Hello everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my first post. It truly opened my eyes. There are other aspects I hadn't considered previously. It hadn't occurred to me that my mother's relationship with Robert may have existed before the divorce. She may just be telling us about it now because it's simpler and more convenient for her now that the divorce has been finalized, and we'd have no idea. Honestly, I hadn't considered it since I couldn't see my mother as a cheater. But now I'm really not sure. She might be, for all I know. Anyway, it's none of my concern because she's made it clear she doesn't want anything to do with me. The only issue is that I can no longer communicate with my brother and I miss him. He and I always got along well, and I hate to think that he could be Robert's child, as many of you have suggested. I'm trying not to think about it, but now that people are discussing it, it's difficult for me to ignore. I genuinely want to know the truth, but I'm terrified. Since I wrote that post, I've had several lengthy discussions with my grandma about these possibilities. While we haven't been able to reach any conclusions regarding the truth, it's gotten increasingly difficult for us to think of my mother in the same manner. I believe that talking to my father about this would provide us with some insight, but I am not sure if he would want to discuss it with us. My mother paid us a visit 4 days ago, and we haven't spoken to her since. On the first day, she blocked me, and later my grandmother informed me that she had blocked her too. To be honest, it's a little ungrateful of my mother. My grandma has been caring for me without expecting child support because she is self-sufficient. My grandmother cares for me out of sheer compassion and love. I can't picture somebody giving up their retirement to care for their grandchildren, but that's precisely what my grandmother is doing. I believe my mother should have been grateful, but instead she blocked her. There are so many things I'm angry about with my mother, and I still have so many unanswered questions. I'm simply hoping that everything will come out in the open. Update 2. Hello everyone. So this is going to be a long update because my father paid me a visit this evening. Apparently, my grandma had called him, but she hadn't told me since she wasn't sure whether he would come and didn't want to raise my expectations. Anyway, he did pay a visit, and as soon as he learned that my mother was engaged to Robert, there were a lot of revelations, which I'm still processing, but I'll attempt to discuss them here. I was astonished to see him and even more surprised when he hugged me and apologized for everything. He eventually sat down with me and my grandmother and told us everything he knew. He informed me that he and my mother had fallen out of love a long time ago, but they stayed together for my happiness because they didn't want to split up the family and put me through the pain of growing up in a broken house. Then around 3 years ago my father began an affair with a coworker. He wanted to inform my mother about it but lacked the confidence to do so. She discovered out on her own approximately a year ago and filed for divorce. She promised him she would keep quiet about it as long as he stayed away from us. She laid forth a number of requirements, including leaving the house fully to her, giving her full custody and promising not to visit us until she gave her permission. She also requested a large payout, alimony, and child support, and he agreed to all of them. The only thing he requested in exchange was that she keep his affair a secret and never tell me, as he didn't want me to despise him or regard him as a cheater. So far, she has upheld her half of the bargain, but at the expense of my connection with him. He also apologized for always being a workaholic and not doing more to foster a relationship with me. In his defense, my mother always demanded more, so Dad was compelled to work all the time. He couldn't afford the lifestyle she craved unless he worked around the clock. He told me it wasn't an excuse, but he wanted me to understand that it wasn't all his fault. I understand, yet it is still tough for me to accept. Anyway, he explained why he broke his pledge to my mother and came to see me without first asking her. In the note she left for him, my grandma mentioned Robert's name and inquired if my father knew him. This is why he raced over. Apparently, he knew not just Robert, but also what kind of guy he was. He arrived to warn us about him. My mother, father, and Robert were all in the same social group in college. My parents had been together, but Robert had a crush on my mother. They had all gone out drinking the night before graduation, and Robert told my mother about his sentiments. My mother was with my father at the time, so she turned down his advances, but she didn't inform him until 2 weeks later. Then she informed him she was unsure about her feelings, so they took a break. My father informed me that they had been on break for over 2 months. In the meantime, some people informed him that my mother had gone on a date with Robert, but it did not go well, and she eventually returned to my father. After they reconciled, my father informed her that he did not want her to talk with Robert again since it made him uncomfortable, and she agreed for a while. However, later that year, he discovered she hadn't cut him off, resulting in a massive confrontation. They almost split up, but after the fight, Robert went to my father's place and they got into a violent altercation. Robert felt it would impress my mother, but she was upset with him for being violent, especially because she had already informed him she only wanted to be friends. She eventually cut him off. My father informed me that Robert was constantly out of control and never did anything decent. After my mother cut him off after graduation, Robert moved away and no one heard from him for years. Now my father believes my mother and Robert reconnected a few years ago when she claimed hearing from some acquaintances that Robert was back in town. He wasn't sure when my mother began conversing with Robert again, but if they were engaged, it meant she had been cheating on him, nullifying all of the conditions she had established during the divorce. My father informed me he was going to confront my mother, but first I wanted to speak with her and figure out what was going on. He agreed to wait until I spoke with her. I'm still trying to digest everything. It's complicated in my thoughts since I'm not sure who to believe. My parents haven't been particularly nice to me and things are simply a disaster. Update 3, I finally spoke with my mother. I didn't tell her about my conversation with my father because I wanted to speak with her separately and see what she had to say. She had blocked me, so I had no choice but to pay her a surprise visit. My father paid me a visit 3 days ago and I finally got up the guts to talk to my mother yesterday. She was shocked to see me at the door, but nevertheless allowed me in. Fortunately, Robert was not home, so I could speak freely. I originally apologized to her, but only to get her to open up. I evaded the question for a time, telling her that it was difficult for me to accept Robert into our family so quickly, which is why I had been behaving out. Then I got down to business. I suggested that it didn't make sense that she meet someone as wonderful as Robert so soon after her divorce. It looked overly convenient. I hoped this would force her to admit to knowing Robert from her college days, but she didn't. She merely told me she was fortunate to have found him, and that was it. I knew my father was speaking the truth about their friendship in college because he had pictures. The only thing I questioned was the veracity of the narrative my father told about the three of them. But when my mother flatly denied ever knowing Robert, I knew who to trust. My mother then made matters worse by admitting that she had rushed into the engagement with Robert in order to forget about my father and everything associated with him. That's when Mom told me about my father's affair, which she made him sacrifice everything for and vowed not to tell me about. At that point, I saw no reason to continue the discussion. I said I'd see her later and went. As soon as I got out of there, I contacted my father and told him he could do whatever he wanted since I now knew the truth. I knew my father had not lied about anything. My mother is about to face karma. I'm not saying my father is suddenly innocent, but he's not as evil as my mother. Update 4. Hello everyone, I have a lot to tell you about. First, everyone was anxious about whether my brother was my father's child or not. I was too. Last month, after my father confronted my mother, they had a paternity test done. Thankfully, my brother is indeed my father's child. My father is currently battling for full custody. Since I'm 15, I may state that I want him to have complete custody, and the court will consider that. However, I am still living with my grandmother. Despite my father's efforts, there are still numerous difficulties that need to be addressed. Until then, I'd prefer to live with my grandmother because I'm always confident in her. My mother was upset when she discovered that my visit was just to seek the truth about her and Robert. She unblocked me once, just to curse me out and then block me again. We have not spoken since. Robert dumped my mother as soon as they got engaged. He vanished after learning that my father was attempting to cut his alimony and child support payments. Apparently, Robert had been lying to my mother all along. There was never any job offer. He intended to join his uncle's failing firm and use my mother's money to support it. That's why he asked me to persuade my grandmother to transfer the land to him. They'd been dating for 2 years, and he'd kept her on the hook the whole time. My mother was duped, and instead of being embarrassed, she has been spreading rumors about Robert to all of her acquaintances. What she doesn't realize is that her friends have been gossiping about her, and that is how my father and I found out about everything. I'm just grateful that my mother decided she didn't want anything to do with me the moment Robert pronounced the word. I would hate to be trapped with her right now. Anyway, my father and I have agreed to work on our relationship, and he has pledged to be a better father moving forward. Once he has full or shared custody of my brother, we'll endeavor to be a happy, functioning family. I'm not sure about the functional aspect, but we can at least strive to be joyful. Now to the next story. 11. My wife cheated with my boss, called me a broke loser, and now she's demanding the house and alimony. I'm fighting back in divorce. I, 26M, have been married to my wife, Zoe, 23F, for a year. We had been together for 4 years and, despite our disagreements, had been able to make it work thus far. Zoe and I are from quite different origins, and her life has been extremely different from mine. We first met in college at a friend's birthday celebration. I fell in love with her right away because she was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. When I started talking to her, I discovered she was both charming and lovely. We got to know each other better over the next few months through texting, and we went on a number of dates before committing to a commitment. However, it wasn't until we moved in together that she told me about her family, which had always been a mystery to me. She had informed me that she did not want me to meet her family because she didn't get along with them and had been out of touch for several years. After almost a year together, I finally told her that I wanted to learn more about her family since it felt like she was hiding something from me, which I wasn't comfortable with because she knew everything about me. She ultimately informed me that she and her parents were no longer in contact because they had kicked her out when she started college. They wanted her to drop out and work to support the family, but she wanted to acquire a degree, which they didn't like. After a violent fight, they instructed her to go, so she did. With the support of a few family and friends, she was able to save enough money to cover her tuition, and that is how she paid for college. Apparently, her parents had always been frugal and unwilling to work hard enough to earn their own living. They were always reliant on the assistance of relatives, who finally isolated them since her parents promised to repay borrowed funds but never did. They owned a failing makeup and beauty company and wanted Zoe to join them, but she chose to cut them off. She informed me that it had been difficult to persuade her family to support her because of her parents' reputation, but happily, they felt sorry for her and agreed to help without demanding anything back. She owed a lot of people money, which is why she worked so hard at such a young age, earning a degree while simultaneously working part-time. Her tale inspired me, and I wanted to help her. I promised her I'd start contributing and assist her pay off her bills. As previously stated, I come from a very diverse family. My father is an ophthalmologist, and my mother is an entrepreneur who has a successful online jewelry business. I grew up nicely, and money was never a concern for me. However, this does not imply that I do not value money or recklessly spend it. I am not that type of person. What I'm trying to express is that I've never had to struggle with money. So when I learned about Zoe's story, I was moved. She had kept it a secret from me for so long because she was scared I would label her as a gold digger, as some had when they discovered she was dating me. We discussed it and decided that I would assist her in repaying her debts more quickly. I started sending her a specific amount of money every month, and she told me it was quite helpful. I never asked for details because I trusted her, and she had never given me any reason not to. I don't think she understood the money I gave her was from my income, not my parents', but that didn't matter to me. We were living in my apartment at the time, and I was responsible for all of the bills. I was already generating money, so it wasn't an issue. Zoe had recently graduated and was still looking for full-time work, and I didn't want her to squander her money while I could manage on my own. We were happy together for the 4 years we lived together, including the year after our wedding. However, her conduct began to change slightly after we became engaged, though not dramatically enough for me to notice. I became really busy at work after we got engaged, rushing to finish everything before the honeymoon, so I didn't have time to notice minor details, such as how she was spending more time on her phone, frequently arriving home late, or how she had ceased looking for a full-time job. I wasn't worried about it because she had just graduated and I knew she'd find something. We married about a year ago and my parents and I paid for the entire ceremony. Zoe did not have a large family, and we couldn't rely on her parents, so we opted to pay for the entire event ourselves. Zoe didn't even offer to help, which I didn't think was unusual given her situation, and I was comfortable with it. Following the wedding, I continued to pay all of the major bills, not expecting her to share anything with me. She informed me she was still looking for work, but none of the offers fit her. She preferred something more demanding. I believed her since she had worked hard and deserved to rest. We also maintained the agreement under which I handed her money every month, figuring she was utilizing it to pay off her obligations. Unfortunately, I realized a few days ago that she was cheating on me with my boss. I was not spying. It happened by coincidence. Zoe was showering, and I was in the living room, where her laptop was charging. Suddenly, I noticed she was receiving a voice call on Instagram from an account called Unknown Lover. My initial inclination was to answer the phone, and then I heard my boss's voice wondering why she had taken so long to respond. The phone ended, and I hung up right away, attempting to make sense of what had transpired. I tried to tell myself that there could be an innocent explanation, but then I opened Instagram on her laptop. When I opened the chats with the account Unknown Lover, I discovered they had been having an affair for a long time, even before we married. I scrolled back as far as I could, and Zoe's long baths gave me plenty of time to unearth everything. They began flirting around the time we got engaged. According to what I learned, my boss, 32M, hit on her during our engagement party, and she responded beautifully. After that, he made a burner account to flirt with her, which is how their relationship began. I realized they had been sleeping together for quite some time, and she had been more verbally affectionate with him than she had ever been with me. In those texts, she repeatedly expressed her love for him and her willingness to give up everything for him. Even me. My employer was hesitant to pursue their connection because he was married and had a child around the age of 5 or 6. He had told her to wait and assured her that they will be reunited soon, which was why she was staying with me. To say I was devastated is an understatement. I began to cry as I read those messages. Meanwhile, Zoe got out of the shower and rushed over to comfort me when she heard me weep. But when she saw what I was reading on the screen, she took a step back. Instead of denying or apologizing, she simply stood there calmly as I cried. After a while, I got upset and asked her what was going on. She simply told me that she had been waiting for me to find out and had even considered informing me herself because she no longer wanted to be with me. She said that she was fatigued from pretending to love me and that she had fallen out of love with me only a few weeks after our wedding. She explained that she had realized my boss was the appropriate man for her. When I asked her why she thought so, she claimed it was simple. A broke loser like me could never treat her the way my boss did. She even brags about lying to me a few months ago about going on a weekend girls' trip with her buddies. In actuality, she had gone out with my boss, and her buddies had covered for her. That explained all of the lovely new gifts, costly clothes, bags, makeup and jewelry she had been flaunting lately. She had been telling me about a friend of hers who had made a lot of money and was treating everyone well, but now I knew the truth. It was all because of my employer. She stated she was delighted I found out on my own and now wanted a divorce since she was tired of pretending to care about me. She even stated that she would rather be single or my boss's mistress than be married any longer. The marriage was over. Before I could grasp what was occurring, she began gathering her belongings. I did not ask her to stay. I was too proud for that. My heart was devastated, but I knew I needed to let her go. She made no attempt to refute anything or apologize for what she had done. In fact, she appeared pleased to be departing. She was going to grab her laptop and depart, but I told her that anything I had purchased for her would remain. The money was mine, not hers. She frowned when I said that, but did not protest and left the laptop at my place. Everything else I had bought her remained with me, but the laptop was the most important to me and I had a strategy in place. I needed it as proof for the divorce since I wasn't going to let her off easily, nor was I willing to forgive my boss. Despite our positive working connection, he had no right to hit on my wife and conduct such nasty games. What irritated me the most was his audacity to appear cordial and polite to me at work while he was sleeping with my wife behind my back. I had always gone out of my way to be a great employee and assist him beyond the scope of my job description. That day, I resolved to hold him accountable for his actions against me. I was aware of his recent involvement in a number of questionable activities. He had failed a company-wide drug test, and I knew exactly where the paperwork was stored. He was involved in unlawful activities, and exposing him for one thing would eventually reveal all of his other secrets. My employer was in collusion with the crew who performed the drug tests, and he had bribed them to fabricate a bogus result. He had paid half of the money up front but opted not to pay the remaining amount after receiving the desired outcomes. As a result, he had a disagreement with the medical team's leader. The head had even emailed the actual test results to my boss as a threat, ordering him to pay the outstanding balance or he would expose him. My employer had received the actual test results just a few days before I learned about Zoe's affair, and we had been discussing them in his office. I remembered exactly where he'd put those papers. When I discovered Zoe and my employer, I decided to expose him. The next morning, I got up early and went to the office. My supervisor frequently required me to run errands and arrive early, so I kept a spare set of keys for everything. I even had the keys to his office, so getting in was no problem. Once inside, I took the actual test results from his desk drawers and proceeded directly to the police station. There I detailed the entire case to the cops and left them to handle it. After that, I concluded that what happened to my boss was no longer my concern. He was detained, of course, because the chemicals discovered in his bloodstream were unlawful. Not only was he jailed, but the whole medical team that performed the tests is currently under investigation. Basically, everyone is in big trouble and it's all because of me. I'm not even hiding it. I've informed the cops that I'm available if they require any additional assistance. I have also resigned from my job because I do not want to be involved in anything else there. My boss is currently being investigated. I'm not sure if he'll be charged, but I'm glad I got him in trouble. He's currently suspended, and if the allegations I made are proven accurate, he'll be sacked and likely imprisoned. The only one who is unhappy about this is Zoe. She hasn't stopped phoning me since the news about my employer emerged, blaming me for ruining her and her boyfriend's lives. She keeps repeating that doing this to my boss out of anger over the affair is wrong and that she is disappointed in me. She believes what I did was harsh and unfair, claiming that it did not stem from a sense of righteousness. However, this is done out of vengeance, which is never acceptable. So, AITA for reporting my boss to the police for drug use after discovering he was hooking up with my wife. Update 1. 1 week has passed since my last entry here, and I filed for divorce before Zoe could. Speaking of her, I've blocked her everywhere. I stopped second-guessing myself after realizing she was a serpent. I did the right thing. It doesn't matter what my intentions were because I reported someone doing anything illegal. My supervisor isn't a nice guy, therefore I don't feel bad about it. If he had been a genuinely decent person with a drug problem, I would have thought twice about putting him through this, but that was not the case. I'm disgusted that I let Zoe live with me and provided so much for her for so long. Above all, I feel like an idiot for falling in love with her. A lot of you asked if there were indicators, and I'm sad to say that there weren't. I don't believe anyone in my position would have predicted what was happening. Even after the romance began, she continued to act normally around me. I doubt I would have found out otherwise. Even if there had been indicators, I would never have suspected she was cheating on me given everything I did for her. I did it out of love, not realizing she was exploiting me. I've even started doubting her claim that her parents didn't want her to acquire a degree. I don't believe it's real anymore, and I doubt she utilized my money to pay off her bills, because there were no updates on it. Like an idiot, I never inquired since I totally believed her, which I now understand was a tremendous mistake. Looking back, I see how foolish I was for trusting her more than she deserved. But don't worry, the divorce is happening, and I'll have her back. Update 2. Zoe was issued divorce papers 3 days ago and we received a response from her today. She is not contesting the divorce, but she disagrees with the terms of the petition and wishes to negotiate. That is all right with me, she can bring it on. She is requesting to keep the house, a substantial payment and alimony. Her statements are bold, given what she did to me. I don't think a known cheater would be so arrogant as to file such a detailed petition to preserve everything for themselves. It's evident she's only wanting my money. I don't think she cares about my employer anymore, he's not in a position to help her financially. Zoe is cold and calculated, and I'm pleased I'm seeing this side of her now because it's eliminating any leftover feelings of love or affection I had for her. I won't lie, I'm sad with how she's turned out, but I'm confident I'll destroy her in court. It's all right to be disappointed and process my emotions, but first I have to win this. We're meeting with a court-appointed mediator in a few days, so we'll see how things go. I also finally acquired the confidence to discuss everything with my folks. I'd been hiding it from them because I was ashamed and embarrassed about what was going on, but I recognized it was a big deal and I wanted to talk to them. I'm glad I did because they were encouraging and promised to assist me financially and emotionally. I believe I will require their financial assistance for some time, as I have recently quit my job and am looking for another. With all of my expenses, rent and now the lawyer's costs, everything is going to be quite expensive and I will have to dive into my savings. I'm not sure when I'll find a new job because I'm still involved in the drug controversy with my employer, who is currently on trial. I do not believe any employer will hire me while this is continuing. I'm acting as a witness against him, which has been quite emotionally draining, but I know I'm doing the right thing and that's what motivates me. In the worst case scenario, I'll simply start working for my father. At least with him, I know my supervisor will never try to screw me over. Update 3. The negotiations have begun. It's been a week and a half since I got the response to my divorce petition. My boss's trial is still ongoing, so no developments. However, negotiations with my soon-to-be ex-wife aren't going well. During these sessions, she is extremely demanding and lies through her teeth, attempting to portray me as the evil guy and villainizing me in order to back up her claims. She's behaving like the victim in this circumstance, which is quite frustrating to me. She comes to these sessions looking like a widow, as if she's been through a lot. I can see right through her act, and it is terrible. I understand what she's trying to accomplish, and it may sway the mediator, but it won't work on me or my lawyer. We will not back down from our allegations. We will undoubtedly receive what we deserve. I am not going to let her walk away with the alimony settlement she is requesting. I'm not sure why she feels she is entitled to it simply because she is now unemployed. I mean, she physically cheated on me, which I believe disqualifies her from anything. I have the proof, her laptop with all of the texts. She hasn't even checked out of her account, but that doesn't matter because I've already captured screenshots. I've shown them during these meetings, but she claims she was forced to hunt for love outside of our marriage because I mistreated her so poorly. She claims I made her do all of the housework, forced her to quit her job, and promised to look after her, but now I'm breaking my word. None of that is true, and hearing her utter such things makes my anger boil. I had to use all of my might to keep myself from walking out of those meetings. My lawyer has told me to remain calm, but it is quite difficult given the circumstances. I won't lie, I'm frustrated. Things are becoming more difficult with each meeting, but I know I must persevere. I'm just hoping it ends soon. I've also had no luck finding a job, which is disappointing. The word of me exposing my boss has spread, and having that kind of reputation in our profession isn't helping me get employed. It feels like I might have to work for my father. There was nothing wrong with that. I only hoped I could find another road. Clearly, it will be harder now that I've chosen to fight the wrong people. Update 4. I filed for divorce 2 months ago, and I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm here to inform you that my employer is going to jail. I'm not sure how long he'll stay there, but it may be 2 or 3 years, though he may be released sooner if he behaves well. The point is, he's currently in jail. I simply feel horrible for his wife. She's a stay-at-home mom who is fully dependent on his money, so now that he's not working, life will be difficult for her. I feel sorry for her and their child. They deserve better, yet this is their current reality. As for me, I've started working for my father. My father was quite pleasant about it and did not make me feel strange or uneasy at all. The divorce proceedings are still underway and we have yet to reach a settlement, so negotiations will continue. I'm trying not to let Zoe get under my skin anymore, and it's a lot easier now that I don't have any strong feelings for her. Update 5. Hello, it's been nearly 6 months since my previous update. I got so busy working for my father that I forgot to update you. Anyway, a few months ago my divorce was finalized. Zoe had to accept my requirements because they were the best option for her. The mediator made it plain that if we didn't reach a deal, this would go to court, and things would be much more difficult for her then. He told both of us, but I knew he was referring to Zoe. She could have lied during our discussions, but she wouldn't get away with it in family court. There would be terrible consequences, so she had no alternative but to concede. We're now divorced and have no touch with one another. To be completely honest, I prefer it this way. I am going to therapy and trying to work on myself. It will be a long path, but I am confident that I will get there someday. I have fantastic friends and very supportive parents, and I'm going to keep them close while I go through this.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.